Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the shared universe of four happy because they're drinking nerds. Yes, it's Monster Party!
Monster Party! Yeah! Monster Party! I'm ready to party.
Here we go.
I've got my drink. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And
we have got a great show.
We
but
do.
But before we get to that,
who are you, sir?
I am Matt Weinhold.
I am SHAWN SHERIDAN.
I'm Larry Stroth.
And I'm James GONIS.
And for this show, it's another one of these great kind of high concept.
It is high concept.
With a lot of topic. It permeates with topic.
Yes, it does.
It overflows with topic.
Wow. Definitely.
Topic heavy.
And the topic is...
What is it?
Sci-fi design.
Sci-fi design!
Yes. Now, we all love our favorite sci-fi movies and fantasy films, but when we're watching those movies, sometimes we don't realize how many people are involved in coming up with the design of all these different vehicles and the world.
And understand how difficult this is. I mean, you're trying to make something for the future.
Yeah.
Sci-fi future.
Or alternate reality or whatever.
What does that look like?
Imagination.
Yeah. There is a futurist quality to the design in many of these things.
And there are some things out there that have held up and some that have not.
And even the things sometimes that don't hold up are kind of satisfying in their own retro way.
I still like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have the perfect guest. Oh my God.
Yes,
this
we
guy
do.
is a person who has done design.
He's done stuff.
Oh my God. A conceptual artist.
He has credits.
Director, even an actor. I've seen it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
He has done so many things. The sheer amount of projects that he's worked on. This is a guy that I've known way back during the days when I worked on the Journeyman project. Yeah, yeah. And we have him right here. Rarely do I throw out the word genius. Maybe the only other time was when I was referring to James.
No,
yes.
James?
But
Who is our guest?
we have Phil Saunders.
Phil Saunders! Woohoo!
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
You threw out the word genius. It missed me and hit the wall behind me.
No.
Okay, let me. let's-
I'm with him. You are right. Genius, sir.
I'm going to read
throw some credits.
some of these credits out.
Let's see what Phil's
And this is
worked
not.
on.
I'm not giving anything away. This is IMDb right here. But
Yeah.
I mean, here you go. I mean, look at Jarhead, Zathura, Spider-Man 3, Iron Man. Maybe you've heard of it. Only one of the biggest movies ever.
Tron Legacy.
Yes, the Avengers,
Avengers.
Iron Man 3,
Iron Man 3.
John Carter. A movie that we
And
all really
we
like,
love that
that we
movie.
feel
Love it.
did
Phil?
not get its
Phil,
day.
We've talked about this on another show. Underrated film. Seriously.
Never seen it.
But you worked on it.
But you did work
worked on it.
An earlier version.
Ah.
But we can talk about that later.
Oh, please.
Interesting.
Oh, that's very exciting. You work on a lot of these Marvel movies. Civil War, Avengers Infinity War coming up. And then this is a really unique title for an Avengers movie. Untitled Avengers movie.
Untitled.
That's
Untitled 1 and 2.
Cool.
Or maybe it's Avengers 4 Untitled 2.
Is it TOO?
Yeah.
Okay, look, this is great, but now
you.
we've got
Thank
Phil
you,
here.
Larry.
No, I want to get to the design.
Of course.
Sci-fi design.
Now, as someone who has worked in this field and done a lot of design
stuff.
I'm curious, what does that job look like? Here you've got Iron Man, for example. This great movie we all love. Now, what are some of the things that you worked on in, say, the first Iron Man?
Yeah, they come up to you and go, "Hey, Phil, work on this," or what do they do?
It always depends on what stage of a project you're coming in on as a designer, what your job is going to look like. With Iron Man, we came in about 6 months before we had a script.
Wow.
Whoa.
Which is not uncommon in the industry today.
Yeah, we just learned this.
What?
Yeah, before he went on air.
Sounds insane. But
Particularly because most of the big budget tentpole blockbuster movies these days are based on existing franchises. So before you even have a screenplay, you've got something to work from. You know the elements that are going to be in the movie, even if you don't know how they're going to fit together. If you start on a movie called Iron Man, you know there is going to be an Iron Man to design. So that's the first thing you're going to do is they're going to sit you down and say, start, coming up with what Iron Man's going to look like. How is this thing going to be made real? How is this going to be a convincing technological artifact and not a guy with gauntlets and silver spandex?
Well, and I know from your background, you designed cars at one point. And what I always take away from those movies when it comes to suits and gadgets, even if it wouldn't actually work, it looks like it would work.
And that's the big trick too. You're designing the illusion of functionality. There's no way that anyone could ever create a device that fits that close to the skin, that has enough mechanical function.
Every time he hits a building, I go, ow!
Yeah,
but Phil, I buy it though. I buy it.
Well, that's the thing.
And that's the trick. That's the trick. Mm-hmm. And really, it's about, certainly with a costume like that, you're kind of trying to solve two different things, which is what makes Iron Man unique within costume design is that you're not just trying to create something that is a believable machine, but you're trying to create a character as well.
Yeah.
It's not just a guy in a suit. When he puts on the Iron Man costume, he's Iron Man.
Yeah.
And Iron Man is his own character with his own personality. He has to feel like, while at the same time, as I said, sort of being a believable technological artifact, he's also a personality. It's not just, there's a believable spacesuit that anybody could put on and be in a believable spacesuit. This is Iron Man. This is a personality of his own.
Yeah.
And we know because he's a superhero, he also has to feel like, the idealized masculine form.
Right.
He has to feel, but without putting nipples on it. Right? I mean, you gotta,
yes.
You got to hide your anatomy in functional forms that we instinctively recognize from our exposure to aircraft and Ferraris and whatever else.
Right.
If you're going to have scapula, shoulder blades on the back, well, what can we draw from that has roughly the shape of a shoulder blade but is functional? So you're not tipping your hat to this thing. You've got a couple of ailerons or something like that with hinges and whatever, and they're functional, and they just happen to be roughly the shape and in the right place to be, your scapula.
Was there ever a nipple in the early drafts of Iron Man?
We had 3 nipples. We were all looking at Scaramanga and
thinking ahead.
Well,
futurist.
You know what's funny? It was talking about Iron Man specifically. The Iron Man from comics that I remember, it was kind of like a bulky costume. To me, it wasn't.
It went through changes.
I know. It did. It did go through changes.
And we had that version too, designed by genius Ryan Meinerding.
Because the first Iron Man, it's like there are 2 versions. You have the one that Stark makes in the cave, which kind of is more of a bulky type thing.
Yeah, a nod to the first Iron Man.
An absolute homage to that original design.
And that's something that when I got that, I love that. I didn't know where the sexy Iron Man costume was going to come in, but I loved that first one.
Yeah,
and how this is something that he put together in a cave. Mm-hmm. And then going on to the second one, I just loved how sleek and how cool that was. And I think you did everything that you wanted to do, except for maybe the nipple thing.
I didn't want the nipple thing.
Oh, you didn't want the nipple?
Well, back when Joel Schumacher was directing.
No.
But the one thing that I do find really remarkable about that design of that costume, the one thing that you do get is, as you were describing, Iron Man as a character, and there's a fluidity to that character's movement, even though it's bulkier than the most recent comic book versions. It still has a sleekness and there's a agility to that costume, that something that looks so formidable, to have that kind of grace be there as well. It's quite an accomplishment.
You're talking about the Mark I, the cave version?
No. I'm talking about when he finally gets his own costume, the Mark II.
Oh, the Mark II.
The Mark II.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Well, credit for that really belongs to Adi Granov. I don't think the Iron Man movie would have been made at all if it wasn't for Adi Granov's Extremis series, if anyone's seen that run of Iron Man. He's a comic book artist who does a lot of very rendered, very thought through design in his work. I know there's, often you'll find technology design in comic books, certainly since the Image Comics era, where it's sort of like, let's throw a lot of gack on there. Let's throw a lot of detail and make it kind of random and make it a little bit asymmetrical so that I don't actually have to draw the same thing from one panel to the next. And no one will notice, right? There's a lot of cables and a lot of, a lot of glowing cylinders sticking out of things, right?
Yeah.
And
don't get me started on glowing cylinders, because I'll go crazy.
And Adi's never done that. Adi really does spend the time to design his stuff in his comic books. And it's beautiful, it's graceful.
Yes.
He's a master at material indication, reflection, and lighting, and all those beautiful, juicy things. And it's beautiful, fully painted work. And I think that was the comic that really made Marvel think, hey, wait a second, this would actually work in a movie. It wouldn't just be a silly comic book character in spandex.
And that's the one thing, Phil, that we've talked about before in the show, is that more than any other franchise, is that Marvel really has taken the superhero world and made it believable in a real world setting, in reality.
Rather than...
Unlike, it's as if like the superheroes are real. It's that they make this kind of gritty, kind of just realistic approach to superheroes with the most fantastic way out there characters too, but they make it all believable. And that's what's so important, I think, to the franchise, that they've been able to do that.
It's wonderful.
And the world isn't stylized. It's present day, Los Angeles, New York, whatever.
Yes.
Right.
It's not Gotham and
Right.
Yes.
That's right. Like
these stylized
so many of the Tim Burton
cities.
movies are like, they're just too much. The Gotham City, just hold it. The Gotham City to me doesn't look like a real city. It looks like a set design. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. Ape City looks like a set. It's not believable. It's like, that's why it's with the Avengers and all these characters setting him in New York and LA and in real countries. That's what makes it work so well.
Yeah, Sokovia.
And sometimes, it really is case by case too, because in some situations that does work. Building that alternate reality.
Yeah, because I mean, Sean, I was going to let you go on your little tangent here. That's great. I know what you're saying. No. I know what you're saying about real life, but that doesn't mean that you can't do some fantastical world.
No, absolutely not.
Dude, I'm
going
to throw out some right in your face that are like, oh, it's not today, but are still so freaking cool and seems very realistic and holds up to today.
Sure. No, I'm just saying in certain cases, like to me, with every next Batman sequel with the Burton films, it got
weirder and weirder.
And the architecture got more and more insane and ridiculous.
And it almost took this modern Marvel shared universe to kind of bring it back to reality.
Well, look, and I understand.
Larry,
No, Sean.
Larry, hold on 1 second. Superman, the first Superman,
yes,
did it right because they set Metropolis in. It was New York.
Right.
Yes,
it was not this super ridiculously stylized.
Right.
It was a real city.
I get
then
that.
you put Superman in that. That's what
Phil,
I'm saying.
fan of that movie, the original Superman.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah. You're my friend. You are. I tell you.
Thank God.
I tell you. I love that. No. But look. If we're talking about Batman, 1989, Tim Burton. Look, I get it. If you remember the whole thing surrounding that film, I mean, they're taking the comic book Batman, and there was all this worry about Michael Keaton and what the Batmobile was going to be like, and it was more fantasy-like. It was more comic book.
A lot more Tim Burton vision.
And I will agree with you, sir, that yes, for each progressive film, it seemed like it got more cartoony to the point where it was almost ridiculous. And we talked about this on another show.
But that's one of the things, though, that actually does work. Those early Burton ones, especially the first two, what works the most, I think, is the design of it, the look of it. And it's as they go along where the rest of it, the characterization, having Keaton as Batman, I didn't buy that for a second.
Yeah, but as far as like...
Keaton was great.
Here we go.
Whoa.
No.
Okay.
He didn't necessarily make the best Batman, but he made an incredible Bruce Wayne.
I liked him as Bruce Wayne.
I liked him as Bruce Wayne.
Somebody else said that
and I'll tell you
too.
the reason why. The reason I liked him as Bruce Wayne is because anyone who gets up and dresses like a bat and runs around has got to be a little bit unhinged. And he played great unhinged.
Yeah, but Phil, also if you're going to be like beating up people, you got to have a bit of a physique, and let's look.
When he was in the costume, he was not a physical Batman. He was very rigid, and I think part of it was because of that costume.
Because of the suit. And he relied on gadgets a lot,
and
too.
in fairness, I'm trying to remember back in 1989, I remember being so excited about seeing that movie, and it was like, oh my gosh, Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and ooh, look how cool that Batmobile is. First that was the initial thing.
I do love the Batmobile.
Yeah. You were excited about it at first. As time goes by, it doesn't really hold up.
Well,
but I'll put it to you, sir. No, Phil, what do you think about that car, that Batmobile car in 1989's?
I loved that one.
Yeah.
The original one.
1960s.
Yes, yeah.
You're talking about
no,
1989 Batmobile.
Yeah, not the George Barris. I mean, I love the George Barris
okay.
one,
Yeah,
of course, as well.
The first.
But yeah, the Anton First
but
Batmobile from the first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The Anton First design across that movie, I think, is pretty great.
Incredible. And that's what made the movie for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
The 1989 Batmobile, however, was not the most functional. The thing was long.
It was cool. It was sexy. It was badass.
The Christopher Nolan Batmobile, much more functional, not as cool, not as interesting looking.
But from a different universe.
Different universe.
Yeah.
Very much.
But that's my question, too, which is, because there are certain things that you go, well, that car is kind of ridiculous, but I just like seeing it drive down the street. But like when you're doing a design sometimes, I guess maybe a lot of this stuff may come from the top down, I don't know, but trying to find that perfect mix of functionality versus style.
Or fantasy element.
Yeah.
I mean, they go, Phil, give us a car. We need a cool car.
Well, the thing you have to remember about basically any character, prop, set, vehicle, costume that goes into a movie, they are all characters. Every single one of them is a character. You have to think of it as a character. You have to think of it as a storytelling element. You can't think of it as, oh, what's the coolest car I could design? It's, what is the thing that's going to tell this story? That you're going to look at this car and half the story is going to be told in that moment.
Well, Phil, how do you do that when you just admitted that you may go to design something, but there's not a script yet?
There isn't a script, but there's still the basis of a story.
So some guy
you're going to
comes in.
you're going to sit down, you're going to have discussions with the director, and the director's going to give you his
certain vision.
There's going to be a beat sheet, or there's going to be there's going to be stuff written down. They're going to hand you a stack of comic books and saying this is the stuff we're drawing from. And they don't start this until they've got an idea of what kind of movie they want to make.
Right,
it doesn't
right.
have to necessarily have a script, but you get a sense of, what the tone of this thing is going to be and, what the purpose of all this stuff is going to be. And you're probably not designing specific details. Well, in the case of Batman, there's going to be a Batmobile. So you're going to be designing a Batmobile. And you know who the director is, who the production designer is at this point. You know what the tone of the movie is going to be. So if you're working for Tim Burton, there's going to be a specific tone to his movie. And it's not going to be the same tone as you would get from Christopher Nolan.
No,
so you're going to design something that's over the top and stylized because that's the aesthetic of a Tim Burton movie.
Right.
It's going to be a little gothic. It's going to be a little, so that's where you're going to start from. And, as story elements come into play, which you may influence with your design or, may come from the writers and the director, those are going to start working into the design. But, if you're working on a Batmobile, it's not like, okay, you got 2 weeks, design me a Batmobile, and then move on to the other elements. And by the time you're finished everything, we'll have a script for you and, we'll all be happy and ready to go. You're going to be, any key element like that. And definitely, if you need an example of design element as character, the Batmobile is certainly one of those.
Yeah.
That thing sells the character and says everything you need to know about him.
Really important part of that character,
Is there also pressure about merchandising in advance? Like
Happy Meals and things
the
like
fact
that.
they're going to have a toy
Okay, we need to.
license.
How's this going to look as a toy?
Yeah.
Come on, don't lie to me here. Come on.
That's a given. That's a given. Certainly that does come into play.
Wait, when you say given, it's like, look, we are going to design something. We know it's going to be a toy.
Of course it's going to be a toy. And let's face it, I mean, seriously, half the reason that I even work on this stuff is because I want to have the hot toy. I want the 6 scale figure of this thing sitting on my shelf.
Yeah.
And all of my colleagues as well. I mean, we've all got a shelf full of hot toys at our desk.
That's awesome,
preferably the ones that we've designed.
Yeah,
Sure.
And some of the ones that we're just really excited that our friends designed. And so that's not really a handicap to the process. Because we're all consumers of that as well. It does get a little silly sometimes. I would say that there have certainly been movies, Spider-Man 3, where story elements and what characters have been in them have been dictated by.
Sure.
Right, sure.
So there's some big.
I mean, when we were doing Iron Man 1, when we started on that movie. And it was myself, Ryan Meinerding, as I mentioned, and Adi Granov, who went from doing the comic book to working on the movie itself, and collaborated with me on the Mark II and the Mark III. The big challenge was this movie will not work unless the suit works. And up until that point, the best anthropomorphic, metal suit had been RoboCop.
Yes, which was cool.
Which was incredibly cool.
Yeah.
It was a great design. Absolutely classic design.
Different thing, though.
But a different thing.
It is. Yeah.
And it was big and heavy and bulky and moved in a very clunky way. Very deliberately by design.
Yes.
But purposely.
How he caught anyone was amazing to me.
Because he has RoboCop and he has a big gun.
I know, but it's a lot
Well, because he can turn corners at a crisp 90 degrees.
Hey, he has the strong voice, and he, put her down.
Stop in the name of the law.
No,
Hey,
come on.
Believe me,
Drop your weapon, or there will be.
And
I am I'm a total fan.
Okay,
I'm a total
okay.
fan.
But you're right, you're right,
I can
though,
make
yeah.
fun of it at the same time, though.
But really, there was a big concern at the time of, can we actually do this? Can we do this in a practical costume? Can we do something that's going to be skin tight enough to get proper superhero proportions?
Because it's one thing to see in a comic book. You can make it look great in a comic book. That's the thing. Sometimes the translation from comic page to movie is going to be troublesome.
Oh, and if you think about it, I mean, comic book proportions, you're looking at,
Yeah.
8 to and whenever you're doing a figure, you're measuring proportion by heads. Is he 8 heads tall, 9 heads tall, 10 heads tall? I mean, I'm 6'2". I'm probably 6.5 heads tall.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you've got to make something that seems heroically proportioned. And if you think about it, stick a motorcycle helmet on somebody's head, they can be 7 heads tall, but you stick a motorcycle helmet on their head, and all of a sudden they're 5 heads tall. Right? So you've got to make something, you've got to design something
think about
that gives you the illusion of superhero proportions, even though you're putting it on a human being, and you're adding to rather than taking away.
Right. That's true.
And you've got to add in the right places and take away in the right places, or at least slim down in the right places to get that proportion. So there was a lot of work that went into, because you couldn't use RoboCop as an example, because again, you're trying to do something that is going to make him more graceful, make him move. It's supposed to be enhancing his abilities rather than reducing them.
Right. No,
so it's got to feel like this is making him smoother, faster, more dexterous.
Right.
And yet it's this big bulky thing.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of trial and error? Was a lot of versions until they got, like, with Favreau chiming in? Like, did it take a while to get it right? And with the dailies and seeing the visuals?
Well, from a design standpoint, Adi really gave us a leg up with his original design on Extremis. And then he was, before any of us were hired, right after Favreau was hired, he had read Extremis, and he thought, they wanted to get an early poster out for Comic-Con. That no design was done. Nothing was done for the movie yet.
Right.
And he said, well, let's go get Adi Granov and have him do a Comic-Con poster for us. And in order to do a Comic-Con poster, which was just going to be sort of a head and shoulders, darkly silhouetted thing that hinted at the design, of course, being Adi, he went and designed a whole suit.
Right.
And it wasn't the suit that ended up in the movie, but it was the thing that pointed the direction to what that needed to be. I mean, it was even beyond his Extremis design, which was more stylized. It was this very believable, wearable aircraft, I would call it.
That's cool. Yeah.
So, Phil, does that mean if I picked up that poster at Comic-Con, I actually have a poster of an Iron Man costume that didn't really exist, which makes this poster a collector's item?
Well, I mean, all of those Comic-Con posters are collector's items, all the Marvel Comic-Con posters, because, they didn't, that's where you got them, and that was it. But yeah, no, that's definitely going to be a collector's item.
I'll keep mine rolled in the tube.
But yeah, so I mean, that really was our starting point, and we went off in a lot of different directions, and then kept coming back to that basic concept. And then Adi and I took that, and, my contribution to that was really sort of taking what he had done and applying, my automotive and industrial design background and bringing it into the real world,
Right.
so to speak. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the real start of that. And and then after about 9 months of design on that, we started working with Legacy, and they had their contributions. They knew how they were going to make it, and how to make it flexible, how to make it snug, how to make it comfortable. And they did a lot of internal R&D, and then we went in and worked with them directly. Myself and Ryan and Adi all basically were embedded at Legacy Studios for a couple of months, just art directing their 3D modelers. It was all digitally modeled, and then it was one of the early things that was digitally modeled and then printed out.
Interesting.
Right?
Did not know that.
So starting the design in advance of the completed screenplay was a benefit, was an asset.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Gave you more time.
It had to happen, and it gave us time to refine and refine and refine. I mean, you never get 6 months to just go through the concept phase of something and then another 3 months to refine it.
What was that moment like where you finally had like a physical costume?
Oh my God! Yeah, the first screen test on the stages down in Playa Vista was just incredible.
Wow!
Because it was, we saw it, and it was a stuntman wearing
I was
it.
gonna say, they didn't get
yeah.
what. And
it was incredible because it was that moment where we knew this is going to work. This is going to be huge.
I remember seeing the trailer.
It's gonna be huge.
I think it maybe was the first teaser trailer where you just saw that shot of Iron Man flying through the air. And like, holy shit, that looks awesome. I was like, wow. Because again, Iron Man was not a huge Marvel character in the universe.
No.
In the comics, it was a cool character, but it was like,
not a big giant seller.
I mean,
it wasn't an A-list character.
No, I mean,
it wasn't the Fantastic Four.
It wasn't Spider-Man, wasn't Batman. So to me, it was like Iron Man. They're going to do Iron Man.
But if you think about it, Iron Man really lends himself to film.
Yes,
because it is such a physical thing,
character and design.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
It's an extremely flawed character, and it's a physical design, and it's not. You're not dealing with superpowers.
That's right. It's not Superman.
right.
So you can sell it in the real world really easily, because it's got so many things that are very clearly relatable to us. And remember, this was, when Elon Musk was becoming a big deal, and so he was the perfect real world model for Robert Downey Jr. to base Iron Man on. So
right.
I would say also hand in hand, it was a brilliant piece of casting.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
I mean,
No, it
really.
was. It was. I agree.
Now, aside from designing the costume, are there other things within those films that you designed as well, or were part of the design team?
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time on the Stark Mansion. I mean, I was on that project for close to a year and a half. So,
Wow.
So yeah,
I want to live there. I like it.
I'd like to live there too. That is it's a nice place.
Yeah,
Cool.
and that design, really the concept for that was originated with the late great Michael Riva, the production designer, who has always had a great love for the work of John Lautner. John Lautner's.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. We have several Lautner houses here in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah. No,
I
he's
mean, really cool design.
Yeah, Southern California architect, residential homes, and so ahead of his time. I mean, these are things that were designed like in the 50s and the 60s with organically shaped cast concrete and
I don't know if you've seen the Taylor Lautner houses, but they changed into wolves.
I'm not familiar with
No,
that.
you gotta go. You gotta go take the tour.
Okay,
Take the
all right.
tour.
Well, back to Phil.
So if you look at a lot of Michael Riva's movies, he's featured a lot of Lautner residences, actual Lautner residences, and Lautner inspired residences in the houses that are in the movies that he's production designed. Like I know he used the Chemosphere, which is that one from Body Double. You remember that?
Oh yes, yeah.
Cool. That's a Lautner house.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And then, he had I don't know whether it was partly shot on a Lautner house, but was mostly fictional, but definitely Lautner inspired in Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, with Drew Barrymore.
With all the glass.
Yeah. So it's that incredible California,
right.
Look it up, listeners. Lautner House.
Rounded.
Yes, look
really,
up John Lautner.
It's so cool.
There
it
are
really
several houses in the in the Southern California area, and they're just unbelievably spectacular, so ahead of their time. I mean, to this day, nobody's making houses that cool. But the thought behind that was the character of Iron Man is really the Marvel Batman. He is the flawed billionaire who doesn't have any superpowers, but he's a genius.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you follow the later versions of Batman, he owns an arms supplier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
So there's so many connections there. And so really the feeling from Jon Favreau and from Michael Riva was he's got to be the West Coast version of Batman. So if he's going to be a billionaire, he can't be living in like an old money mansion. He's got to be he's got to be on the cutting edge. He's got to have, something quintessentially West Coast.
Right.
And it's got to be a billionaire's home.
It's not stately home.
No.
No. It's got to be, and we explored a lot of different things. We explored, having a sort of green house that was all sort of wood and, obviously renewably sourced wood.
Right.
Of course,
sustainable.
I did a version of that where the front door was this massive double door that was just a slice of a sequoia.
That's cool. I like that.
But
It didn't make
he would live in Malibu.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, of course he would live in Malibu. And where is he going to live in Malibu? He's going to live, in a California state park.
Sure. Yeah.
Untouchable territory.
Right. And what I love about that house too is that there is. You were talking about all these designs having a character to them. The house is an extension of his character. There's a little bit of an arrogance and flash about the house.
Right.
Not just arrogance and flash, but it's very, dare I say it, stark.
It's true.
By design, when I was designing the bedroom for that, there is nothing whatsoever personal in that bedroom. It looks like it was furnished by an interior decorator. There are no family pictures.
Sure.
There are no knickknacks, no souvenirs.
It's not warm.
No, it's not warm. I mean, it's absolutely cutting edge design. It's artistic. I mean, and Stark himself doesn't design anything that doesn't look cool as well as being functional, right? And Michael Riva's thought process on all of that was that, you don't see his personality until you go down to the garage. Mm-hmm. And there he's got pictures of his dad, and he's got all these mementos and souvenirs in his cars. Yeah. And that's where he really lives. He doesn't actually live in his house. He lives in the garage, in his workshop.
I see that.
Cool.
And so all of that, every time and that's, again, another example of every time you're designing any element of the movie, you're designing a character. You walk into that room, and it's telling you a story about the character. It's not just, let's just furnish a billionaire's home. It's like, no, it's got to be this billionaire's home.
It's funny to hear you say this. I never really thought about it. Each of these things has to be like a character. But also another thing is that Jeff Bridges' Iron Man in the first one, that character is very different from Iron Man. Iron Man's more like a sleek, heroic look, whereas the Jeff Bridges one is more of it seems like it's mean.
That was originally supposed to be Crimson Dynamo. In the original script. And then as things evolved, it became Ironmonger.
Gotcha.
But it's a really cool design.
It is cool.
I mean,
all the
he's
designs
bigger.
are right.
He's bigger, and he's just mean.
Yeah.
He just seems meaner.
Yeah,
Even
and that
color
one
of
was a collaboration between Ryan Meinerding and Adi Granov. And it was designed to be something that was evolved from the first suit, right? Because remember, they got all the pieces of the Mark I.
That's right.
and they reverse engineered it from that. And, and it was intended to be a militarized suit, in contrast to, the Mark II and III Iron Man suits, which were representing his change of heart and his distancing himself from the arms business.
Although you could do a lot of damage with those suits. If you really wanted to.
Sure, yeah.
A missile or two in them, not exactly
You'll get over it.
pacifist, but
Phil, I wanted to ask you too, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Tim Burton's first Batman film came out, wasn't that kind of the first superhero movie where you saw the kind of getting away from the men in tights kind of idea? It was like kind of the armored styled, anatomically correct superhero.
Right.
Because before even the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, it was still a guy in tights.
Basically tights.
Yeah,
but
in padded tights.
No.
In all the right
that was
places.
real muscle on Christopher Reeve.
But from Tim Burton's Batman on, it kind of changed the look of superheroes in general.
Yeah,
in
the
movies.
molded rubber.
Right? Yeah, that really
Yeah.
became the thing.
Molded abs really helps.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's what I found.
Well, and obviously it's necessary when you're casting Michael Keaton.
Sure,
It wasn't
sure.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
That's no.
Right. But that really was influential in that way. I mean, it really changed the look. Everybody went down that line from then on, really. You never really saw
It feels
guys-
more realistic. To me.
Yeah,
It feels
yeah.
more
functional.
Yeah, functional
Right.
and attached to our world as opposed to, Adam West running around the
Right,
docks with a bomb.
And there has been a trend, I think, in general in sci-fi design or comic book design of heading more and more towards, and the buzzword that you will hear from directors every single day is, I want it to be grounded. It's got to be grounded.
Yes, right.
Grounded.
Which, certainly makes a lot of sense and has its place. Sometimes it's code for, I'm terrified.
Really?
I don't want to go so far that I'm going to alienate anybody. And that's when it gets frustrating.
Well, in other words, don't pull a Joel Schumacher.
Well, it's not so much the don't pull a Joel Schumacher. The place where it gets
Yes.
the place where it gets frustrating for designers is when you're designing something alien. And
Right. How do you have something grounded? that's
yeah.
alien?
exactly, and that's the
Right.
thing is that your first instinct, as a sci-fi buff, really, and certainly as a designer, is, well, if I'm going to design something alien, it's got to be alien.
Yeah.
Like it can't look like we made it in a factory. It's got to look like something so far removed from what we think of as normal. It's got to be, dare I say, alienating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
so you don't the idea of, well, let's keep it grounded so that the audience isn't alienated. Well, they should be alienated. It's aliens.
Right.
A perfect example would be Giger.
That's what I was gonna
And
say.
I'm
I'm so glad you brought that
Because
up,
that
talking
was-
about aliens.
Right, when that was first came out, I mean, Ridley
1979.
Scott saw Giger's artwork, right? And then it's like they said, that's the alien, right?
It's the alien, it's the world, it's the ship. And the one thing, though, that I always am impressed with when I watch that film is that talking about the grounding part. The grounding part is that it's still a guy. It's still a humanoid
It's anthropomorphized,
shape.
for sure.
But I'm gonna.
But that's where it stops.
dude.
Everything
even
else after
beyond
that.
I'm going to throw this out to
Yeah.
you, though. I'm going to throw this out to you, Matt. I hear what you're saying, but when you see the movie, when you watch the movie, it's kind of hard to see that it's a guy, two arms, and the legs, the body, and
It's
there's
also the performance
It's
of
the,
the-
and
of
the
the
way there's these angles
It's
that are
how it's shot.
and it is
Yeah.
amazing. And I want
They pulled a Jaws.
I'm so glad, Matt,
Yes.
you brought up
Yes.
H.R. Giger, because I tell you, I mean, for listeners, he's so widely
Kind of a
known.
game changer
Yeah,
in a lot of
total
ways,
game changer.
yeah.
But H.R. Giger was, man, talk about the twisted artwork this guy created.
And not just for the character, the alien character
No!
itself, but the derelict ship and
Yes!
the eggs.
Space jockey.
Right.
I mean,
Everything.
it's on and on. And Phil, talk about sci-fi design. When that film came along, I mean, the stuff I knew and loved is, okay, let's say Battlestar Galactica, your Star Wars or rocket ships and things. This creature and that world looks so different, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Talk about looking alien. We had never seen anything that twisted and
Sure,
dark and slimy
and I'll
before.
tell you what worked in that in terms of it being both grounded and alienating, because you can't just come up with something just completely out of the blue, completely unrelated to our experience, and have it be scary.
There has to be a
Because
frame of reference.
There has to be a frame of.
Psychological
There has to be a
basis.
psychological frame of reference, and as creepy and bizarre as H.R. Giger's work was, it was all based on human anatomy. I mean, all of that stuff,
Yes.
all of that stuff was anatomical. I mean, it was,
Genitalia.
That's what made
Yeah.
it. That's what made it creepier.
and that's what made it creepier.
Playing on your subconscious in a lot of ways.
But what was the most alienating about that design, and what was the most groundbreaking in terms of all of the creature design that had come before, is that it had no eyes.
Yes.
And that
True,
was
yes.
that was incredibly controversial at the time, because everyone thought that what was scary was those eyes, those eyes looking at you.
And I think Giger's
And what-
originally version was like a skull.
It was a skull, but there's like
Oh
a
yeah,
shell
but
over
with a
it.
carapace over top,
Right,
but you
right.
didn't actually
There's
see
no
the
eyes.
skull.
There's
There
no
were-
eyes, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it was an empty sockets in that skull
Yeah.
underneath,
Right.
and it's still in the design. I mean,
Yes,
it
yeah, yeah.
still has that skull inside, but you don't see the eyes. And what was so brilliant and genius about that, and what made it so scary when no one was expecting it to be scary without eyes, is that, as we say, eyes are the window into the soul. And this thing had no soul.
Right.
This thing was so unrelatable. It was just this killing machine. There was no way to. There was no empathy in this thing.
No, Right.
and,
no.
and we get it. I mean, just look at how your dog looks at you, or your cat looks at you.
Right.
They know to look at your eyes.
Yeah.
They're a completely
right.
different species, and
Yeah.
they connect with you by looking directly at your eyes. And this thing had no eyes. There was no way to
Connect with it in any way.
to expect any kind of mercy from this
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And that was
Right.
what was so damn creepy about
Its
it.
eyes were really its teeth.
And that wouldn't have worked if it wasn't somewhat humanoid and anatomical.
Right.
Exactly. You
Like-
need something
yeah.
to relate to.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a
yeah.
squid with no eyes, it'd be okay. Well, that's just a monster.
Right,
but this was
right.
more than a monster.
Right.
It was a sentient being.
Right.
Yeah.
You could tell it was a sentient being, and it was a sentient being that
It was a
just
scheming,
didn't
thinking,
care.
and like the Iron Man movie, in a lot in the same way. Like if that suit didn't work, just like in the Alien film, I think too. If they didn't get the look of that alien right, I don't think it would have worked.
Oh, and I think a lot of people have seen what the original creature from Predator was. Oh, go look on the internet and try and
The
find
original Predator.
the original Predator.
I'm not sure I've seen that. I'm very familiar with this. The
Vaguely remember some
it's this
clunky designs.
lobster insect looking thing that looks like it's from a 1950s
No.
sci-fi
Really?
movie.
Oh, wow.
And that movie would not have worked.
Right.
No.
Right.
Sid and Marty Croft were really the wrong choice.
So, I believe it was Stan Winston. I believe it was Stan Winston that did the design.
Yeah.
That got that.
One of my
great-
favorites still to
and
this day.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know what's so funny? The look of that creature. Talk about another alien
You're
type.
one ugly motherfucker.
Oh, yes, very good.
Yeah, but
impersonation.
until
Yeah.
that point,
But
you're basically being attacked by Bob Marley.
Yeah, now, look. In fairness,
Hey,
terrifying.
mad.
He has.
Bob
Hey,
Marley.
it's like a helmet. It's got a helmet, and those are his little, pierced hair things.
Dreadlocks.
Yeah. Well, yes, but they're not dreadlocks, James.
They're
You see?
space dreadlocks.
Whatever it is, it works because I
works.
remember.
When he pulls off that mask.
Yes.
there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great So for listeners, I'm sure you're familiar with the Predator. Where Arnold Schwarzenegger and a bunch of guys going out to kind of rescue these people out in the jungle, and they get attacked one by one by this forest, and it's this one alien from outer space that's basically hunting them down. And you finally end up this battle with Arnold Schwarzenegger and this alien creature, and he does figure out a way to how to battle it. Kind of hurts the creature, and the creature finally, he's been wearing this helmet the whole time. The creature finally, when he takes off the helmet and shows his face, and it's got those little mandibles.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen anything.
Yeah, that was
like
very
that.
unique,
And it was
yes.
so cool and badass and scary to me.
And the story in the industry, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but the story is that Stan Winston was on a flight with James Cameron. I don't know where they were going, but Stan was telling him about this little movie he was working on, and how they were having trouble coming up with they had to replace the design of the creature that the previous effects company had done. And apparently James Cameron said, you know what I've always thought would be cool? If you had like a mouth with like mandibles on the side. So
Interesting.
Once again,
don't know if it's
Cameron.
true or not, but
I thought it had
right.
something to do with he was eating shrimp. No. Okay, maybe not. Okay, maybe not.
I do remember.
crawfish.
I do remember watching that movie in the theater, and I'm enjoying it up to the point where he takes off his mask. I'm fine with it. I think it's great. But there was a little part of me that was like, I hope this isn't just it. Like, I hope I get to see more of this creature. I hope we don't just get the helmet all the way through the movie.
Right.
And when the helmet comes off, it went so beyond my expectations.
Me too, man.
I was like,
Me too.
I was so happy. Like,
and
great.
and Schwarzenegger's line just hammered it home.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead.
And you know what was a creepy addition to that too is when he sets the timer, the bomb. He's gonna blow himself up and Schwarzenegger with him. But so he starts roaring, but then
laughing.
he starts laughing, and it almost sounds like a human laugh. But that made it even creepier.
It is a human laugh because he's playing a recording.
Yeah, that's right, and it's just creepy. Yeah, it was really good.
Is John McTiernan still in business? Is he still making? I haven't heard his name in years. Does anybody know?
I don't know.
I couldn't tell
just out of
you.
it?
We had.
We're gonna
IMDb.
We're gonna get him on the show.
We're not speaking anymore.
Yeah, we're gonna get him a show.
Now, Phil, you were a sci-fi fan growing up, then, right? Did you have a background?
Oh
in
yeah,
it?
no, I'm a child of Star Wars.
Okay.
I was
Star Wars child.
to date myself. I was 7 when Star Wars came out.
Wow.
I saw it and decided right then and there that that's what I wanted to do for a living.
Wow. So you got
and
into the
Jedi?
business with an eye toward that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
So like Ralph McQuarrie,
Oh yeah,
his artwork
so thankfully, and I'm incredibly grateful to my parents who didn't do the expected, well, you're really good at art, so maybe you should try and be an architect. No, they literally, like, the day after we went and saw Star Wars, and I said, that's it. I know I live in a small town in southern Ontario, and there's maybe 100 people in the world, and they all live in Southern California doing this kind of work, and that's it. They were like, oh, get them the Star Wars sketchbooks, and that was my start. Just copying Joe Johnston, Ralph McQuarrie sketches out of the Star Wars sketchbooks.
Wow, that's
cool. So for me, it was Joe Johnston, Ralph McQuarrie, SYD MEAD. Those were my heroes at the time growing up. So when I was, and I was even before then, I was, drawing cars and drawing spaceships and drawing all that kind of stuff.
And you did work in the automotive industry, right?
Yeah, eventually, yes. And so when I started looking into college, this is before any of these schools, Gnomon or the Art Center, College of Design, Entertainment Design Department. There was nothing like that. I mean, the only place you could even learn about the existence of visual effects or concept designers was, having your Starlog and your Cinefantastique and your
loved them.
Cinefex magazine.
Cinefex.
I mean, that was my Bible as a kid. And I remember even like a National Geographic World magazine, which we had a subscription to.
I had that. I used to have that.
Had an issue.
You had National Geographic?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was the kids version was National Geographic.
Only for masturbation.
Not the kids version.
National Geographic World was like the dynamite for like.
Exactly. And they had an article in 77 or 78 on the visual effects of Star Wars.
Wow, really?
And that's how I learned about this before.
Wow,
I hadn't started subscribing to Cinefantastique or anything at that age. But that's how I learned about how all this stuff was done with, like miniature models. And I made model kits and stuff. So I was like, you can do that for a living. And it'll be real. Oh my God. So, I started like taking my Star Wars model kits and like taking a big roll of paper and punching holes in it and painting it black and basically having a crank from one roll to the other, behind my spaceship and like shining a light from behind, to have it like look like it was flying through a star field.
Sure.
Wow.
But for every
like
1,000 kids that did that, and I think we all probably did something like that.
You actually had talent.
You actually made a career out of it, a successful career.
Well, when it came to college time, I just looked at, there's no one will teach you how to do this. There's no program to learn this. There's no school that'll teach this. So I just looked at what my heroes had done, and they'd all gone to school for industrial design. They were all, had done automotive or industrial product design, and that was the common thread. So, I went to the local art school and that had an industrial design department and, in Toronto, and that was the Ontario College of Art. And, they didn't want to teach me that. They wanted, it's Canada, right? So if you're an industrial designer, they teach you how to design wheelchairs, right? So it's all designed for social needs.
But it could be like a cool
This is
wheelchair
Canada.
that-
This is Canada.
It could be a cool wheelchair that shoots missiles.
no.
And stuff.
We don't design Walkmans here.
Yeah,
We don't
The
design
mo-
the cool stuff.
The Mark III Rascal Scooter.
Exactly. Exactly.
The underwater one is amazing.
So here I was going into this college, and I wanted to design all this frivolous stuff that wasn't going to benefit anybody except me. So yeah, I had to sort of take that program and turn it into my own program, but that's where I learned those skills.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. Well, especially back then, you really had to find your own way because that was way before
True.
geek chic.
Geek chic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's true.
Oh yeah, yeah. All the stuff that's mainstream now was definitely fringe.
Right,
When
that's true.
when I got my start in this.
And it's interesting. We were talking before we started the show a little bit about Blade Runner and how with Blade Runner, here's this movie that now everybody loves. It's so many films and people are influenced by this movie. And at the time when it came out, it was kind of like,
Not a huge hit.
Not to me.
well, not to us.
Hey, look,
no.
look,
I mean, it
some
wasn't
people,
I was blown away.
Just to refresh your memory, some people have said, like, I'm going to admit, Matt, I'm one of those people that when I went and I saw it, look, I was in awe of.
There's no E.T.
No, well, look, I didn't need. Okay. Enough of the ET crap. Just because I like ET, it didn't bother me that it didn't have ET.
Why don't they get married at the end?
No, it's because I guess part of the reason we kind of talked about this. Maybe it was because Harrison Ford.
You liked
really
La La
gets-
Land, didn't
No,
you?
You're getting off the subject.
Okay, go ahead.
Harrison Ford's character gets beat up a lot. And
Yes, he does.
this is not. I
In
mean,
every movie he's in.
well.
That's true.
But not not so much in Star Wars. But this was
Yeah.
not. I guess
it goes downhill from there. It's like
no,
Raiders.
let's just say it wasn't exactly what I expected. I'm not sure what I expected. I expected somebody to be this more heroic guy that takes out all of these androids. No, I hadn't read the book.
But talk about
it's
immersing into
yes,
the world.
Yeah, well, getting back to your point, Mr. I like things grounded. This is the film that it went above and beyond. I mean, here's a city packed on a city packed on a city.
Right.
But it made sense to me. It
Right.
seemed
And it was
like
believable and tactile.
the future would be like that. Those
And guess what?
What?
Guess what? We still believe the future is going to look like that. We still do. I mean, there isn't a sci-fi city designed in any movie that isn't either borrowing from Blade Runner or a reaction to Blade Runner. And it's the
That's
same
true.
thing as Giger's Alien. There isn't a creature designed for any movie that isn't
Totally.
either borrowing from Giger or reacting to Giger. But I mean, those two movies, made God. How many years ago now? 30 years ago?
Yeah.
They're still the gold standard.
And
They
Blade
have
Runner you can
established
watch
the look.
right now, and it still works.
Oh, yeah.
perfectly.
It's still really cool, and the whole
And
It
the
still looks
VFX
great.
hold up too.
absolutely
Because
Yes.
it wasn't completely reliant on optical
And
composites.
that's what
No.
makes, that's what
There
makes
was a
me
lot
nervous
of
about the
in-camera
new
stuff.
one.
Well, we
too.
may disagree about the ending and how to interpret it, but we can all agree that we all did like it
Well, it also
very
depends
much.
Only
on
you
which
disagree.
No,
Which
no.
ending? Because there's like several different endings. There's at least a few different cuts
well,
to that movie.
let's just say
He
that
doesn't-
we
he doesn't
agree to
understand
disagree.
the-
No, what
Phil-
understand?
Larry doesn't
No,
understand
no.
the unicorn thing at the end and what that meant. So.
No, we all can dream of unicorns.
That's what he thinks it meant.
Unicorns.
there's-
look, it's a magical creature, Matt. It's a magical creature.
This-
You're in your magical
You're
imaginary
getting a
world.
snapshot into the
Yeah.
Holly Hobby world.
Oh yeah,
Larry Strode.
Very funny.
But you know what?
Very funny.
There's obviously, there's the Deckard's replicant camp, and there's the Deckard's not a
That's true.
replicant camp.
That's true. There's both.
And-
Yes,
and
obviously. Obviously.
I fall.
He said obviously. The guest said that, sir.
I fall into the revisionist history camp.
Uh-oh.
I do not believe that Deckard was originally intended to be a replicant.
Neither do I.
I can see. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because hasn't really Scott gone on record to say, but if you watch the movie, it's true.
He's gotten on the record to say that yes, Deckard is a replicant, but I
believe
don't know.
him.
I firmly believe.
I think the studio didn't
that-
want that.
I kind of believe that it's a really great idea, and I think it's one of those things that the director went, God, yeah, that was a great idea.
Yeah,
I'm going to
after
appropriate
the fact.
that after
Yes.
the fact.
It is
Yeah.
not. It is not clear, Phil. It is not clear. Okay.
Oh, it's definitely not.
It's
But
not
see,
developed.
it is
It's
not clear.
developed.
Okay,
No,
all right, all
no,
right,
no,
all
no, no.
right,
Don't
all
do
right.
don't do that.
Put your
shit
hands
with
on
me.
the table.
No, I'm just saying.
Put
you,
down the
you-
gun.
You just
Now.
there's no gun. I'm just saying. Don't give me that shit where you say, "Oh, everybody knows." No, it's not obvious.
Here's my argument for thinking that he did think that in the beginning.
Oh no! I mean, you're going to spend another hour. There goes.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole-
yeah.
Well,
I want to talk about sci-fi
well, hold on, we
design.
will.
How many times has this
design
been
of-
argued on a podcast?
Oh, let me count the
Google
on a
search
previous episode of this podcast, it's been argued.
But I think that it would have been done much better than you see in the director's cut. Like it's super choppy and vague. It's like Ridley Scott got shot down by the studio heads and went, all right, well, isn't that where the voiceover came in too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
it
I think
didn't
that
have
was added
It didn't have
after.
to do anything to do with the. That was test screenings. I
That
mean,
was test screenings?
Or-
Okay.
Right. It was
But,
after.
but
right.
getting back to sci-fi design, since you brought up Blade
Okay,
Runner,
yeah.
I know,
Which-
no, I'm just
amazing designs.
look and
Yeah.
you know, this is so cool, Phil, that you brought up this thing about grounded and something that looks like it could be real. Not only the environment, but that gun.
Well, the gun is lovely.
Deckard's
Yeah.
gun is something that is so, it's like iconic. It's like this
a beautiful mix of retro and modern.
and it's freaking badass and
Yeah.
powerful, but it's not, you know, we've seen like as interesting and as cool as it is, Fifth Element, that whole design, the guns in that's a little bit this larger than life thing. The gun in Blade Runner is so freaking cool.
and,
as far
and
as
the
like a
spinner,
weapon.
the spinner,
And the spinner car,
too,
how cool is that?
Was very, I thought, very
Sid Mead.
believable. Yeah.
Sid Mead, yeah. Well, and was he also? Because I always remember going to a convention right when the film came out, and they were talking about, I forget what the panel was, but they were talking about the parking meters.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that they
Oh,
just
yeah.
kept building
No, oh.
onto, which I love that idea of like,
Oh,
well, we'll just
every
keep
little
adding stuff.
Every little bit of that movie was designed. I mean,
Yeah.
they just didn't leave anything alone. I mean, they didn't go like, oh yeah, well we just have the old parking meter. No, they designed like new parking meters. They designed new street crossing lights. They designed.
They designed
every
magazines in
little
the
thing.
future. Magazines in
Yeah.
the future, if I remember.
The umbrellas.
The
have, like,
umbrellas have the
the
lights.
handles, which
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
somebody will make those. I want to
That's a
get one
great
of those.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in lesser hands, you would have had when Deckard goes to that Asian market where, you know, you can get the Chinese food. You can also get, you know, replicant snakes
Right,
and whatever
right.
else. You know, in lesser hands, that could have had a real Buck Rogers-y kind of everything's, you know, chrome silver and whatever.
Oh, Sean would have liked
and
that,
this,
though.
This almost looked like
Oh, even-
LA could be now.
Yeah.
Even the club, because I mean, you remember
Yes,
that?
yeah.
Remember every time they'd have a dance party in Buck Rogers, the TV show, and everyone would just be undulating with some like
A rope,
Yeah,
right,
it was
lighted
a
rope.
rope. Because that's the future. That's how we're going to dance in the future.
Wait, we're all gonna have lit
Now that's where you get into the design of like we've got 2 weeks. I got lighted rope.
One week.
Done.
Yeah. Totally.
It's like, so what do we got? What do we got lined
we've got
up?
2 weeks and we've got $25.
But yeah, I mean, Blade Runner is one of those things that you just keep going back to, and I don't know all that much about the new one that they're doing, but one thing that's going to be very important is to really match that look because it's
And
and that's going to be hard,
Yeah.
But not
Replicate
too
it.
much.
but not too much, right?
But
right.
not too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Again, that's another case of somewhere where I have a lot of faith in the director, Denis Villeneuve.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
You know.
Because Ridley Scott's producing it, but he's not directing it, right? I think
Right.
with the new one.
Yeah, dare I say, thank God.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
I think
don't-
you're right. Yeah.
Well,
After
well,
Prometheus.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I think
He's spending
you're right.
time on the second Prometheus.
Yeah,
or
let him.
there-
Let him.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Right.
That's-
yeah. Because all that kind of design, like the look of Prometheus, I think is fantastic, and everything else, forget it.
You know, at this point, I'm far more excited about from the director of Sicario and Arrival than I am from the director of Prometheus.
Yes, yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of sad, but it's true.
I love the design in that one. Yeah, Arrival. It's amazing.
And incredible sensitivity to storytelling and character.
Yes.
Which,
Yes.
I mean, I have to
Yes.
say, you know, when I was a kid, I would watch literally anything that had visual effects of any kind. And I
Right,
didn't
I think
we're
care.
all
And
kinda
I just-
there.
Yeah.
I just ate it all up. And, you know, now that I'm an adult and now that going out to a movie means, you know, $100 in babysitting.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean,
There'll be no
something
Star
special.
Chaser or.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I don't actually go see that many of the big blockbuster releases because they are so disappointing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, I am reliant on Rotten Tomatoes to find out, you know, I'm not going to show up if it's getting less than 85% or something on Rotten Tomatoes. Because, no, seriously, I mean, if I only get a date night like once a month at best, you know, there's nothing more depressing than going into a theater and walking out and going, oh my God, we could have gone to dinner and talked
But then in a couple of months, you can also catch it on Netflix. So just a couple more months.
Yeah, but it's not the
different.
same.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you know, I don't want to watch those things on Netflix either because, you know, it's like, okay, well, they're great. You've just removed the spectacle side of things, which was the only thing they still had going
or the
for
3D,
them, right?
IMAX.
Yeah,
If it's Civil War.
Yeah.
I want to see that on a big screen.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
a Star Wars movie. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, though, I do appreciate some earlier films that really did immerse you in a world that was very different and they had never seen before, and they make worlds work really well. Even something like the original Planet of the Apes. Ape City,
100%.
Design.
Ape
The
City, which was
design.
not the most elaborately designed. I mean, but it was just so believable and alien. But functional, and that movie worked really well.
Costumes as well.
Costumes,
Well, I mean,
aesthetically across the board.
Of course, the minute you say alien, you're talking about like a seminal piece of design. I mean, you know, we had never seen blue collar in space before. I mean, that was what made that movie incredibly special.
Wow.
And if it was the, you know, the original script where it was, you know, the crew of the USS Snark, which was like a military survey vessel in space or whatever, it would have been, you know, it would have been a 1950s science fiction adventure.
Right.
But
Would have been more like Aliens, maybe.
well, no, because it wasn't back then. It was, you know, if you read that original version of the script, it's a little bit more sort of the Forbidden Planet version of space military, you know, Star Command-ish kind of stuff. It wasn't the grunts in space version that Cameron saw. But I think, you know, translating that to, well, let's just have it be, you know, a blue collar crew, you know, in a tugboat pulling a refinery through space. I mean, that's what made it so incredibly relatable, and making it that relatable made it that much scarier.
Yeah, those
Arguing about their wages.
those scenes.
I
where they're just, like,
want to talk
shooting
about the
shit.
bonus situation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's probably the finest Yaphet Kotto on the show yet.
Now you worked on Tron Legacy also, right? Because that's another series of films, both the first Tron for its time and Tron Legacy. I thought, again, totally different and unique world.
Different
that you're
world.
immersed in.
Complete different world.
And that must have been really cool, though, especially with Legacy, just kind of like updating that universe.
I mean, and the vehicles. I think everyone's favorite. I'm guessing, but the motorcycles or the light cycles.
Yeah.
Like I said, and
Again.
what I was so thrilled was that they were actually able to make a toy out of it. You know, so they made a few variations. There's the blue, the yellow, and the red.
Yeah.
I have those.
And that's
very exciting.
again credit going out to Darren Guilford, the production designer. I think did the first pass on that light cycle, and then Daniel Simon and Harold Belker, both brilliant, like myself, people who had started out in car design and went into film design. And I came on that project later in the process.
So you missed the light cycle.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't do the light cycle design. Would have loved to, of course. Certainly a big dream, but I got to work on a lot of. I mean, you know, there was so. I mean, this is a movie where every single thing in that movie is designed. There's nothing, you know. Once they're in Tron World, every single thing in Tron World is a unique new design. So there was a ton of stuff to design in that movie, and you know that was a fantastic experience. Not just because, you know, as flawed a movie as the original is, and good Lord, is it ever a flawed movie?
Oh yeah.
I still
I still
You know,
like it a lot.
The
you
look
know-
of it is what holds up, though.
But it has a real charm, though.
How unusual
it's
and
incredibly charming,
Yeah.
and it was a groundbreaking movie for its time. And of course, I remember being incredibly excited about that movie when it came out. I mean, and after seeing that movie, I was in my first computer programming class in summer school right after that movie came out, and we were on like I think Commodore PET computers, programming in BASIC, and I had my little project was writing a little Tron text adventure because I was so excited about Tron, and we were using a little programming language called Logo that was like a geometric graphic programming language, and just trying to do like a little light cycle, basically just drawing a line that would turn 90 degrees.
the Tron world, if there were, instead of the cycles, there were like walkers.
Yeah, no, actually, instead of light cycles, it was a single pixel drawing a line. Yeah, come on, I'm a kid at this point.
Sure, of course.
Like Etch-a-Sketch.
But I mean, it was so inspiring. I don't know if it's my revisionist memory, but I remember being a little disappointed in the story at the time, which is probably
big
not
time.
true. Probably not true. I probably didn't have that much discernment at that age.
It's a little dopey.
But
I bought it. I was fine with it.
it's an incredibly hard movie to watch now, and I know because I immediately went and watched it when I got that job. Like, I got to rewatch it. I got to rewatch it. And it's like Christmas time, and I'm like, my nephews are all excited about video games and stuff like that. Video game nuts. And, I went home to Canada for Christmas, and I was having Christmas with my nephews, and I said, guys, I got a real treat for you.
From 1980.
I've got this movie that's like, I'm working on the sequel right now, and this is a movie about a guy who gets stuck in a video game and has to like play all these video games, and they're like so excited, and we're like all set up, after dinner, and we put the DVD in the DVD player, and everyone's huddled up on the sofa to watch it, and literally like 20 minutes in, my nephews are like, Uncle Phil, I gotta go do some homework. Are you talking about? It's Christmas vacation. You don't have homework. And they just couldn't sit through it. And
really,
and frankly, I couldn't sit through it either.
Well, the pacing was different back then.
Oh my God!
Like,
Oh no! Even for the time, the pacing on that one was.
Next, I'll show you a magic picture machine called a ViewMaster.
but no, Tron Legacy was an incredibly fun project. Incredibly fun project to work on.
Are they going to make another one? I mean, I think
I worked on the sequel for about, or the threequel for that for about.
Threequel. I like that.
I don't know whether I was on it for 6 months or
Did it
9
get
months or
shelved or
something,
whatever,
and well, that one's an interesting story, and I don't know that anyone's got the real story on it.
Can you talk about it?
Well, I can speculate like anybody else.
Sure. Go for it. Go for it. Why not? That's what we do.
Here on Monster Party.
I think the official word that we got when the show went down was, well, right now Disney has all of these Star Wars movies to make.
Yes.
And all of these Marvel movies to make.
Yes.
And all of these, because this is right about the time that Cinderella live action had come out. And they had a whole slate of live action remakes of classic Disney animated movies.
Right.
And so the word was, well, we just don't have a release date for this thing for like the foreseeable future. Everything's been taken up.
No, I understand.
So we got to shelve it, but one of these days it'll come back. And honestly, my own feeling, and this is, not the official word of Disney, but my own feeling is that when we were doing Tron Legacy, there was a huge mandate within Disney to find a Disney sci-fi adventure franchise. Because this is before they bought Marvel. It was before they bought Lucasfilm. And you had Star Trek doing big money out there, and you had Transformers doing big money out there.
Sure.
And Disney did not have a sci-fi franchise. They had Pirates of the Caribbean, which was doing really well, but they didn't have a sci-fi franchise.
Did they bring up the black hole?
Oh, that's been brought. I mean, that was the thing. Is like they looked in their back catalog and they had Tron and they had the Black Hole, and those were the big things. And there have been many attempts at developing a black hole sequel, and I have friends who've worked on that.
That's one that I enjoy more now than I did.
I mean, and
watching it
in a
originally.
way, to me, that always bugged me that with the ending, to me, it didn't really have the ending that was satisfying. I think that could easily be, well, I mean, you'd have to recast the whole entire thing. Cause
Yeah, it got metaphysical.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was some silly stuff, but I always thought it would be a great film to make a Black Hole Part 2.
Again, it's the look of that movie, with the exception, in my opinion, of like
Vincent the Robot. Yeah.
But everybody else and everything else in that film looks really cool.
He had a great voice.
Maximilian.
Yeah,
has a really
very cool, yeah.
unique design.
Yeah.
You know, with
Evil
the,
robot.
Yeah.
with the possible exception of the requisite cutesy robots.
Yeah.
With the big eyes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
with Vincent
You know,
and
that-
Bob.
that were-
This, old Bob.
Clearly child service being played out there.
Yeah.
They were the Ewoks of the movie.
It's a mixture of that and R2D2.
Do any of you guys have the toys for that, by the way? The little figures?
He does.
Actually,
You
yes,
do.
yes.
You do?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
does.
Oh, you
well,
do?
Gina has many of the toys.
Does she
we
have all
have
of
a
them?
large Vincent too, actually.
Oh, you have a large
Yeah.
Vincent.
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. Do you have any of those?
Yeah, but now there's
God, no.
there's
No,
nostalgia
no.
charm.
You know, the hard figure to find is the old Bob. Really, really different. You don't have the old Bob.
voiced
neat.
by Slim Pickens,
Slim
right?
Pick- No.
Yeah. No, I think so.
Yeah. But
And
it's
you
like,
can
I
actually
have-
pull Slim Pickens out of.
No,
Yes, you can.
you can't. No, that's not. That's
I would
not
buy
true.
it if that were the case.
I know, right? Wouldn't you? Yeah. And Roddy McDowell out of Vincent.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, that's
I
fine.
did enjoy the Tron animated series that was out. It was pretty cool.
that was excellent,
That was
wasn't
really
it?
good.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This.
It's
I don't
Tron,
remember.
Yeah, it was on.
Tron Legacy, no, not Tron.
What was the network? It was like Disney X.
Yeah, it was a Disney. Yeah,
something.
Disney
XD?
Kid X.
Disney
or-
XD.
Is it a
Disney
more
XD.
modern thing?
No,
Oh, yeah,
it
this
was
was since
actually
Tron
a
Legacy.
Yes, a sequel to Tron Legacy.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Continues
no, it was
the-
really cool.
Really
really
stylized, really good.
stylized, really
Yeah.
great design.
I'll look for this.
Lance Henriksen
yeah.
does a voice, one of the voices.
wow.
Paul
Oh, and
Rubens.
they had Garrett Hedlund on there.
Yeah.
And they had
Really
Olivia
cool.
Wilde
Yeah.
was in there. Yeah,
No, it's really good.
yeah. It's very, very cool.
Now, as a design icon, I would have to throw in 2001: Space Odyssey, because now it seems like there's a movie which is actually kind of like parallel with the space program.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
For
you're
the time,
getting,
right,
yeah,
right.
you're getting a lot of extrapolation on designs and things that we were actually trying to do for our own space program, and just so many of the things in that movie. That's another one where you go back and you go, this holds up,
absolutely.
especially effects wise, completely
Yep.
holds up
Yep.
now. The ships, the planet stuff, certainly all the space
Oh,
suits.
and one of the reasons why it holds up so well is because it was pre-optical compositing, right? So all of those effects were in-camera
So it's
effects.
physical models.
They were physical models, or they were photographs of physical models moving in front of. Or so it was either multiple exposure,
Okay.
because they're mostly shooting against black, right?
Right.
Shooting against Starfield or black or whatever, so they could get away with a multiple exposure. And some of the stuff, like I think the moon bus was a still photograph of the model moving over an environment,
And it kind
and
of-
a lot of like trickery basically going
Right,
on.
right.
It kind of looks that way when I think
Well,
about
because
it
it's
now.
static, because there's no
retrospect.
parallax to it.
Yeah.
Well, and it also works with Kubrick's, cinematography aesthetic, which is very flat,
Flat, yes.
Right.
very
Style.
symmetrical.
Yeah.
He's not the guy who's gonna do a dolly shot around the thing
Right.
as it's flying,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I didn't. One of the things, one of the first effects books that I ever got, they were talking about the Dawn of Man scene, and that I didn't realize until I read the book that the background for a lot of those scenes was front projection,
Yeah.
and it looks so good. It feels warm. I mean, that's talk about a Kubrick movie. A warm moment is that sequence. Yeah.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, that film really, there's so much about it that just sticks out in my mind to this day. And was that something that influenced you when you were?
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? Absolutely. I mean, in the early days before Star Wars came out, that was it. I mean, that
Right.
was the
Right,
only
right.
post-movie serial realistic movie that had come out. There was that, and then there was Silent Running. I
was gonna say, Silent
which
Running.
Douglas
Running.
Trumbull directed,
Yeah.
which was
Yep.
Another
Gorgeous.
great one.
And that ship, the Valley Forge.
Go watch it again. I mean, it's
very heavy-handed.
It's very, if you can get past,
Joan
all of the
Baez
Joan
song.
Baez,
Yes,
all the
Joan Baez song.
Well,
Hey, just a second here.
that's
No,
my-
I'm gonna
Joni Mitchell
I'm
and-
just gonna defend that for a moment.
you were right the first time. Joan Baez.
At that time in the 70s, we're all, give a hoot, don't pollute. We don't want to, mess up our environment and stuff. And her voice and the singing. I mean, if you can think back into those times, I don't know.
yeah,
I think,
very much of
the
its
time.
I mean, because I don't want to
That's
throw Joan Baez.
Well,
no,
let's just say that Joan Baez was an unnecessary character in that movie. I didn't.
Right.
To me, the screechy kind of voice going
for the listen.
maybe we should blow this place up. I don't know.
Look,
Stop this infernal music.
For the listeners, I think if you haven't seen this was back in the 70s. Why are you laughing? That's not funny. Back in the
It's funny
70s,
because it's true.
It's in there's this day and age when
very
Earth
pro-environmental,
Yes, but
yeah.
Earth is kind of like it's getting kind of gross and stuff. So we create these spaceship that has these environments, these natural environments.
Geodesic domes
yes,
with,
and they're
forests.
and they're in outer space to kind of
They
protect
paved
them.
paradise and put up a parking lot.
in
Yeah.
space.
and so you have
Bruce Stern.
and these other guys who are kind of like
Huey, Louie, and Dewey.
No, I wasn't gonna get to the robots.
His astronaut friends.
His
who
astronaut friends.
are kind of
Talk about-
douchebags.
Yeah, they are douchebags,
yeah, they're the
and so
douchebags.
it's like they're all on the spaceship. They're supposed to do what they're supposed to do, kind of take care of, manage the whole thing. And Bruce Stern is a guy who just loves and cherishes these environments that have been
nature and
yes.
animals.
Yes.
He loves Joan Baez.
And then they-
He loves Joan
To
Baez.
put it simply, they're the last forests on Earth.
Yeah.
The last
And-
living
and
forests
so
have
they
been
get
put
this,
on spaceships.
So they're sent this message that says, "You guys, you need to jettison these environments."
yeah, we're
and-
repurposing the freighters.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
it's too
come-
commercial
expensive.
use.
get rid of
Right.
them and then come back home, and it's very difficult for Bruce Stern's character
right.
to deal with that. So it's dated, but it's
But talk about great design. The
robots.
robots. Yeah.
Well, not only
precursors
that, but
to
it's-
R2D2.
Yeah.
Phil, I did not know how these robots how they were functioning. I
But
really didn't.
you know now, right?
Yeah.
Don't say there's a chimp in there.
No, there's
Because
not.
Oh,
you know,
do you
they're-
still not know?
No,
They're-
I know now.
they are not chimps.
I know
No,
now.
they're not
no,
chimps.
because we had this discussion on another
But
show. You
really
threw chimp at me,
really believable robots,
in the
though.
day. Yes,
It's funny because I literally, like a few weeks ago, I was in.
Space.
Yes, that was the week before. I was doing a podcast in space. No, I was at this great, probably one of the last real used bookstores in the city. I can't even remember. It's like the most obvious name. It's
last
called,
bookstore?
It's called like Used Books or something. It's like right by the Van Nuys courtroom. Like you
okay.
can see.
Oh,
it from
that
the Van
one.
Nuys courtroom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll find it. Come on. It's like Van Nuys.
I don't know how many times
like
I'm getting out of
Nuys-
the tank.
Van Nuys Boulevard. And
need something to
a
read.
block north of Oxnard or something like that. Anyway, great used bookstore. One of the last surviving. Kind of like in Silent Running. I mean,
Yes.
sooner or later they're going to have to jettison that,
Huey,
that bookstore
little,
into space.
Little
and-
robot's going to be like putting books in the shelves. Little Huey's going to be.
But yeah, I was wandering through that bookstore and
Is that the garbage that you read? Books that I read have a character and a plot. I don't know what voice I'm doing.
grumpy old man. I found the Cinefex issue on Silent Running.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, brilliant, beautiful stuff. But what was cool about that movie is that, it was kind of like the movie Moon back then. I mean, it's the same sort of pace, the same sort of psychological attitude. I
Right,
mean, it's,
right. Yes,
it's
it's-
that tone of movie. And, you make Moon nowadays and it's like, whoa, groundbreaking.
Right, right.
It was a great movie.
Cool
but-
movie. I like
I always go back to that place. It's like, yeah, this is great if you've never seen anything else.
Right, right.
There's a whole history of films that you can discover through us, for example.
That's true.
But there is a great like all the pre-Star Wars 70s sci-fi like Rollerball,
Logan's Run.
Space 1999 that all have this distinct 70s feel to them.
Yes.
Especially Logan's Run.
Yes,
Oh,
Logan's
yeah.
Run. Logan's Run is like the disco future, where everybody's, it's just like, but
And it
back
still
then,
holds up as a movie, by the way.
as a movie. Yeah, I mean, it
it's
has
still a
dated-
great story. I've watched
I
it
still love it.
recently.
I still
and
love it.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah,
But
it
the
really is.
design of their future is,
Oh, no.
It's a
like a
shopping
party
mall.
at
It's a
Bob
shopping mall.
Guccione's place.
That's a cool future.
That's the future I want to live in. Who real? I mean, we all love Blade Runner, but who the hell wants to live there?
Fuck no. Yeah, I'll see you in the love shop.
With Jenny Agutter.
Yeah.
That's true.
I want to live in Matt's holiday.
High praise indeed. Thank you.
No, too many
I want to
stains.
ask you to
This is Counselor Troy.
That's a classic joke from my act, listeners.
you go.
Find the CD.
talk about Zathura a little bit, because
Zathura.
That's a very different kind of movie that has some really cool design in it. You know, I mean, the game board itself, the robot. I mean, what did you do in that film?
I worked on the game board.
Cool. My wife and I actually have the game, the actual game that they put out that came out with the movie. We have the actual
Which I
game
was
one.
so disappointed in. I really was. I wanted Shiling to make like an actual tin toy wind up
Right, it's
Zathura game board. I was
Right.
so clinging to that. And I do have a Shiling wind up tin toy Zathura
You have the robot. Yeah,
I have the robot.
They're expensive. Those are really nice.
Oh, I didn't know they
cool.
they made
Yeah,
it
they made-
official.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
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 Oh
Oh,
yeah.
I
You
didn't
don't have
know
one?
that.
John
No, I got
Favreau
one.
gave me one of those.
Oh,
Wow.
Got pride of place on my
Oh
shelf.
wow,
for
we
sure.
gotta get that now. That's
Yeah,
You
they're
are-
really
you are
they're really
money.
nice, Sean. They're
But
not
that was,
cheap.
That was a cool. I like that movie, and John Favreau too. Like a real love for that kind of genre and that space.
Oh, absolutely.
Space age
I mean, there
adventure.
was so much love, and once again, Michael Riva, production designer on that one as well. And to this day, that's still unbeatable for me in terms of just my experience in filmmaking. Like it was the most fun project that I'd ever worked on, and not
Wow.
just because it was one of the early ones, and my eyes were still full of, as they still are, the stars of like, oh my God, I'm working on a movie and I'm on the Sony lot, and partly the fact that we were actually shooting there. Back in the day when we actually used to shoot movies in Hollywood, like
Yeah.
Hollywood
Right.
actually used to make
Right.
movies.
Yeah.
Right. We're making a picture.
Yeah, we're making a picture, and it really felt like that too, because we were, the art department was, God, what was the name of that building? Okay, so there's this building that no longer exists, but I was in 2 art departments in this building, and it was this building from the 1920s, I think. That was originally an Army Air Corps barracks building. I think it was called the Gutenberg Building or something along those lines. Can't be the Gutenberg Building, or we would have been making all kinds of
Bibles.
We would have been making all kinds of like police academy jokes. but something like that, named after like some famous inventor. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, it was the oldest building on the lot, probably one of the oldest buildings on any lot, and it was this ramshackle old 2-story building. They had the costume warehouse sort of on the first floor, and then this outdoor single flight staircase that ran like the length of the building with no interruption up to the second floor.
Okay.
And I mean, like literally, like you take one wrong step and you're going for about an hour down this staircase,
Wow.
right? Wow. But what was great about it was this old art department building, and it had these like A-frame beams above, and you could just like smell the cigar smoke seeping from the old wood paneling, and you'd sit down and just imagine the ghost of all these other illustrators and set designers.
Listen, kid.
Yeah, exactly.
I want you to design something from the future.
Yeah, exactly. They'd all be like you could just picture them smoking in their suits and ties with their
secretaries
hats
on their knees.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it was a great project because nobody was expecting anything of it. It was a relatively modest budget.
Yeah,
It's a small movie.
And a very positive movie. It's not like a
Sean, the
kind
sto-
of innocent.
But we were on the lot, and the executives never came by to check on what we were doing or
Really?
anything
Wow.
like that. There was no interference. We were just having a great time. Michael Riva was definitely an old school Hollywood guy. He was Marlene Dietrich's grandson, so he was like
Jeez.
old school movie royalty, that like just the coolest guy ever. And like seriously, every Thursday and Friday, 5, 6 o'clock would roll around, and he'd like be, okay, kids, pencils down, and crack open the scotch.
Nice.
And I mean, it just felt like, oh my God, this is what movie making is about.
Wow.
It was just
Yeah,
amazing.
that's great.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I feel like, I think it's a really great little movie.
Yeah, could you, Phil, because it's not really a well known. It did not do well. But can you just
give us
give
the
it in a
basic
nutshell?
plot.
Because I would like people to see it.
You bet. Okay, so Zathura was nominally the sequel to Jumanji.
Yeah. Right.
It's called Xanthura or
Zathura.
Zathura.
Okay.
And to this day, I don't know whether it's Zathura or Zathura.
But it begins with a Z.
Begins with a Z, yeah. And Jumanji, if anyone remembers, was one of those 80s movies.
There's a game.
Yeah,
involved.
it's kinda fun.
Kids
Yeah,
play.
so
kinda
basically,
And it takes them into this jungle, and the jungle kind of comes into life, kind of a thing.
Right, and this
Xanthura,
this is the space version of that, where
Yeah.
you've got a couple
Right.
of kids and
Two
their
brothers.
father, there's been a divorce, and the father's bought this old craftsman style, Pasadena home, and he's renovating it. And they're in the basement, and they find this old, dusty 1950s tin toy board game, the space adventure board game, and it's got
With its box?
what's that?
Does it have its box? It's very
Yes.
important
Oh,
to
yes.
Larry. Okay.
Yes, it has
it
its
does.
box.
Has
Yes.
it- Larry-
But it's
it has its box.
Yes, which I love.
it's totally ratty.
Oh.
Scuffed corners and some tears.
Oh.
And
But it's
so
rare.
What is
It's-
that? Yeah,
it's
so that's-
rare though. It's rare.
All right, okay.
So I don't know what your rating system is. It's like a C9 or something, or a C5.
Phil. It doesn't matter if it's a rare game. I mean, it's like this Robbie and the Space Patrol car. Very, very rare toy to find. Very difficult to find. If you can find one. I mean, I have one, but it's really difficult to find. But if you have one, even if it's not in great shape, it's terrific to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they find this game.
They find this.
So you find this game.
and they don't care how much it's worth. They're not going to
kids.
they're not going to put it on eBay.
Exactly.
No, so they're bored. The dads had to run out because somebody spilled something on his drawing for work, and they're there, and teenage older sister is sleeping, and the two brothers are fighting, and they finally decide, okay, we're gonna found this board game. Let's start playing this board game, and of course, the board game takes over. So, it's this beautiful, little rolled edges tin toy board game with this beautiful little key, and you put the key in and you spin it, and a card pops up, and of course, every time a card pops up, whatever it says happens for real. So next thing you know, their beautiful craftsman house is floating through space. And oh my God, what are we going to do? We got to keep playing the board game to get out of here.
Right.
If they can go through, the little board game spiral. And of course, there's these two little rocket ships that are on these ratchets that, move forward every time they turn the key, and all the, beautiful nostalgia here, 1950s nostalgia. But it was a very, very sweet movie. A pleasure to work on, some really great stuff. And definitely everyone who went into that movie had so much love for that nostalgic.
Right.
Great design.
Right,
Great,
right.
great
Nostalgic
designs.
fit, and just trying to be as authentic as possible. To
Right.
them.
Right.
So Jon Favreau is an authentic fanboy. I mean,
Oh,
his heart is
absolutely,
really into this
absolutely.
material.
And
Clearly.
he was such a huge fan of the art department too, because he originally wanted to be a cartoonist or a comic book artist. That
wow,
was
okay.
one of his early dreams. So he had a real affinity for the art department, and he basically just hung out most of the time in the art department on that movie.
That's cool.
That was where everything was happening.
Yeah.
Right, that's where all the drawings
Yeah.
were coming up, and you can see what this movie taking shape. and
I
it was a lot
wonder
of
if
fun.
maybe if the movie had a different name, maybe it would have done better. I've heard that maybe the name of the movie might have made it difficult for it to get as much publicity or have people to go see it.
I would suggest that what happened was that it came out a week after Chicken Little, which, while not being a great Disney movie, did really well at the box office.
Right.
So it had to face the second week of that coming out, and then the week following, a Harry Potter movie came out.
Yeah.
And because this was not a big franchise for
Right.
Sony, they didn't advertise it very well. There
I think it's
just wasn't a lot of money in advertising.
More appreciated now. I mean, I think people are discovering it now.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a very solid movie.
Yeah, it really is.
And speaking of movies that should have done better than they did, John Carter, you promised us.
Yes,
you
John,
promised us a story.
Phil, just really quickly,
Sure.
John. I remember all the hype of John Carter, and I remember thinking to myself, why aren't they calling this John Carter on Mars? And this came out at the same time as Hunger Games, and the criticism that I'd heard was, well, you had Disney throw all this money in a project that was written in the 1920s, and here you have another film which is about younger teens, about a book that was written not so long ago. So everyone went to see Hunger Games and didn't go see John Carter. Plus, it's called John Carter. Wow, John Carter.
Such a dumb. I'm not saying you're. No, I'm just saying that's such a dumb excuse.
I thought it was a sequel to Michael Clayton. Actually,
Phil, I knew I'd heard how much money was spent on it, and I kind of had this thing like, oh man, I wanted to see it. I never got around to seeing it.
Yeah, me too. We
then
later saw it
we had
on
this
DVD,
conversation.
Yeah.
So no, for me it was on television. A year or so later, I'm like, I want to see what all the fuss is about. I started to watch. I'm like, oh my god, this is pretty cool.
It's really fun. Yeah.
And so maybe my expectations were low or something, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I felt
too.
bad. I felt bad that it would have been great to have seen this on a big screen.
It could have been a great franchise too.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously the title was a mistake because there's, it's completely misleading. John Carter, like.
Were they ever
of Mars?
Yeah.
That's the part that tells you that it's a science fiction movie.
Exactly.
What if we just call it?
Tells you
What if we
it's
just
a
call it John?
nostalgic science fiction.
No,
movie.
and I know a bunch of people at Disney were let go. That was a huge fiasco. It was like a firing squad because it was like massive, and it was a huge failure. And a lot of people were let go after it, but. It is a film that I really like.
Great design too.
Yeah, it does have great design.
And what did you do on it?
Absolutely nothing. Because I was not on that version of the movie.
No. So now what did you do?
Did you do?
So I mean, there were a number of versions of this movie that were in development. It started. I don't know the full story. I know there was an early version of this movie that was going to be directed by the guys who had done Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow.
Okay.
And what I had heard about that version was that it was overly ambitious, very expensive, and it was scaring. Can't remember whether that was at Disney at that point or whether it was at Paramount. But the version that I was on was the version that Jon Favreau was going to be directing.
I did not know that.
And he had gotten a lot of the same art team that had worked on the previous version. So that was Ryan Church, who people will know from the Star Wars prequels and from the new Star Wars movies. He's, one of the two, major art directors in the Star Wars franchise. But, brilliant concept artist. So he had already been on the previous version of that movie, and then a bunch of us as well. So this was a version that Paramount was trying to get out really quickly because they were going to lose the license. They had the option on the movie. There was a window of time to try and put a version out before the rights reverted, and I think I don't know whether it was already arranged that Disney was going to pick it up or what. I don't know the story behind that. But ultimately, Disney did end up picking up the license and doing their next version, which also had Ryan Church and some of the same people on board. So there was a lot of continuity in terms of the design team, even though the design changed radically from one version to the other.
Right.
The version that I was on, Jon Favreau was directing, and Mark Fergus and Hawk Osby, who had written Children of Men, were writing the screenplay, and it was a very, very good screenplay. And I mean, they're brilliant guys, brilliant writers. They had written on Iron Man after that, and they had a very challenging task because that novel is
Edgar Rice Burroughs novel.
Tough one. Yeah,
Right.
It's a tough one because while it's full of great ideas, the storytelling in it is paper thin. The drama in that, when you read it, it's
full on melodrama.
It's very pulp. It's very
not only that, but it just blazes through any conceivable conflict and drama. And it's basically like, it was against 20 of their mightiest warriors. But I just, when I found that southern pluck inside me, my blood boiled and I dispatched them quickly. And it's like, but that's the interesting part. How did you just, that's it. That's all
it was like a
you know.
sci-fi Commander McBragg.
Yeah. So very, very pulp. Very pulp.
Did I ever tell you a story?
And John's take on this was a much more modestly budgeted movie. It was really sort of A Man Called Horse on Mars.
Okay. Wow.
Right?
That's cool.
It was also about a Southern gentleman post-Civil War as a former slave owner coming to terms with racism and slavery, because there's a lot of those themes in the Martian world.
Right.
Yes.
It was a very smart script, I thought, and it would have made a really great movie. And I think ultimately,
So that's why they didn't make it.
Right.
Exactly. I think ultimately Paramount was a little rushed and they were a little scared. Really funny story about the design process on this was, again, we had Ryan Church, we had myself, we had Ryan Meinerding, who, nowadays people know as the visual development supervisor on all the Marvel movies. And I mean, this, he is, I've worked in this business forever. Ryan's a good friend, full disclosure. But, when you want to throw the word genius around, this is the man you should be throwing it at, because...
Okay, we take it back.
Yeah, please do. Put it on the shelf, use it for something. But no, I mean, he's a modern day Leyendecker, modern day... he's Norman Rockwell as a concept designer. I mean, he just... His keyframes, even back then, he was doing these beautiful black and white keyframes, and every single one of them just captured the spirit of that movie so brilliantly. But so we had this crack team of top concept designers doing this beautiful work. And the feedback that we got from our presentations were, guys, you got to dumb down the artwork because it's making the movie look too expensive. Because the artwork looked so good. Right?
What?
Yeah.
Wait,
I mean, we got this feedback from
you have to
them.
dumb it down?
Ryan Church came up with a technique in Photoshop of desaturating our illustrations, running a filter called Find Edges that gave it sort of a line drawing quality, and multiplying that on top so that it took all of these beautifully painted keyframe illustrations and made them look like watercolor sepia
So took the detail out of it.
to take the art center flash out of them,
And then you
whatever.
shot it on 16 millimeter and
exactly.
drug the film behind in
So
your
I mean,
car.
literally, because they were starting to get nervous that this was going to be too expensive, we had to make the artwork look less expensive.
Wow. That is
like they were using cheaper artists or something.
Wow.
what a strange business.
Oh yeah,
bizarre.
I mean, at least once in my career, I've done a black and white illustration and had an executive say, "Now the final movie is going to be in color, right?"
Wow.
But so Phil, you worked on this a little bit. They had this comment, and then so did they just say, "Okay, Favreau and his team"?
We had a
it
finite period of time to come up with a presentation with a screenplay and the artwork to support the screenplay that they were going to give a green light to or not, and it was a no.
And then so you moved on to your next thing.
Well, so then
Yes.
Yes.
and then eventually Andrew Stanton ended up being the director of the final
With
version.
Disney, yeah, because
Right.
Paramount basically decided they did not want to spend the money at that time.
Right.
I think probably it was one of those things where it fell into that sort of no man's land between big blockbuster and too inexpensive to market.
Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
they just decided, let's let go of the franchise. And
And we were saying, I think the end result is a really an enjoyable film.
I mean, as far as like design goes, there's so many really cool. I mean, filled with so many really cool designs, from the little like dog creature to the flying vehicles to the little.
And they stayed pretty close to at least the original
the aliens
as described.
the forearm
or,
thing.
Yeah, or they're like the Frazetta drawings that are based on the novels.
yeah.
Now, when it comes to anything that we haven't talked about, do you have any projects that you've worked on that were like especially enjoyable, or something that you felt like you went beyond the Call of Duty and what you provided?
Oh, I always go beyond the color.
Well, we're not used to that kind of discipline around here.
Certainly when I aspired to be in this business, there really wasn't much of a business there. I mean, there just wasn't that much product. And then, by the time I broke in, science fiction was becoming more mainstream. I had a kind of a circuitous journey, even though I always knew specifically what I wanted to do, that I wanted to work in visual effects and work in concept design. I did take a roundabout way. I ended up first, I had planned in my senior year of college to take a trip down to California and interview at all the visual effects studios and stuff, which I did. And the week before I left, a designer from Nissan Design International, one of the satellite think tank studios that dot the Southern California countryside, had come to our school to do a talk, and I showed her my portfolio, and she said, "Oh, if you're coming down to California, take a trip down to San Diego, and we'll give you a tour." And a tour turned into an interview, turned into a job offer. And, that ended up being my ticket to California. Mm-hmm. The movie business works on a freelance basis for the most part.
Right.
We know.
Yeah,
I mean, every visual effects studio I went to said, "Wow, this stuff's really great. Do you have a green card?" So, and of course,
You didn't, so.
my blood runs 50% gasoline anyways. A detour into car design for a few years was awesome. Yeah.
And then going over to Presto,
And then Presto, yeah.
where we met.
Yes,
Working
yes.
on those Journeyman Project games.
Yeah.
That must have been a real fun time for you in the sense of like now you're into your sweet spot of science fiction. You got time travel. You got comedy.
Oh, yeah, and you got to remember at the beginning of the 90s was when, the IBM Aptivas were coming out, the first personal computers with a CD ROM drive.
Wow. CD-ROM. Remember that?
Ooh.
Yeah.
And they had video and stereo sound.
Yeah.
And, this was an exciting time. And this was a time when the video game business was pretty much dead. This is post, Super NES, and so the video game business was sort of in its dormancy period, and the computer game business was just coming alive.
Right.
Particularly with the adventure games, with live action video, the stuff that ourselves and Cyan was pioneering with Myst. And then parallel to that, you had Bungie and id Software doing Marathon. On the Apple side, and doing Doom on the PC side, and doing this 2.5D, the precursor to the first-person shooter 3D games that are basically the staple of the video game industry now. And so it was a very exciting time. And of course, everyone was just going gaga about multimedia and how it was going to be the interactive television of the future. And we thought, we're ideally positioned to be the Lucasfilm of the interactive television future. We'll produce the content now, and then we'll just become this giant mega corporation in the future. Until everyone discovered that, what? People who watch MTV don't actually want to direct their own videos. And all of a sudden, the bottom fell out of the multimedia interactivity business, and it just became subsumed into, it's the video game business.
Right.
We're making video games here.
Right.
Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
But I remember coming into it cold and seeing all the stuff that you guys were putting together, and the idea that you could walk into a game and experience a whole new environment and walk through it, and that you'd have to get information from my character, Arthur, and all these things that I'd never even heard of. It all seemed very new, and at that time, those games did very well, right?
oh, yeah, no, it was incredibly successful.
Yeah.
I mean, so successful that I left my day job at Nissan designing cars and joined Presto full time after a year of doing it. And it was super exciting. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely a college dorm atmosphere, as I'm sure you remember.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. It was a good time. Good time.
Yeah. And you were asking, is there anything that I was particularly proud of? Certainly, that was something. I mean, in particular, Matt, your character.
That's right.
Is one of my proudest moments, because what we were trying to do in those days, and to me that was all about trying to find the right balance of interactive storytelling, trying to find the sweet spot between interactivity and true storytelling, emotional storytelling. And it's a really hard balance, and I think people are still struggling with it, trying to find this compromise between, pure interactivity, which gives you complete immersion, where you're in control the whole time, and storytelling, which is really by definition linear.
Right.
And any good story, the ending has to feel inevitable.
Right.
So every moment matters. Every moment in that storytelling counts. And we all know how unsatisfying those choose your own adventure books were when you were a kid. You can't have 10 different endings and have every single one of them be as emotionally satisfying as the others.
Right. Yeah.
And if they're not,
Yeah.
if you've got like one really good ending and then a bunch of options just to fool people into thinking that they have a choice, then you're just wasting resources.
And for me, if I choose my own adventure, it's going to result in me in my room with
a sore arm.
and the same tattered issue of Club International.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is.
Club. I remember.
But no,
I
I mean-
remember Club.
Yeah.
Good times.
Matt's
Talk about
character-
interactive.
We were trying to, back in those days, we were trying to solve some issues that we had found with a lot of the games of the day. And this was the second game in this series of time travel adventures that we had come up with. And our first game had predated Myst by about 6 months, and Myst was the huge hit that really brought the spotlight into this genre of games. Yeah. And all of us loved it. It was a really great game. But one of the challenges that we found with it was that it really was completely freeform. You just wander around and you sort of stumble into things.
Yeah.
And what we felt would be really exciting was to find some way of integrating sort of game help into the game. Because,
using a character.
my philosophy as creative director of this game company was a good game designer should be like the host of a good party. You want everybody to have a good time.
Yes.
You don't want anyone to feel stupid.
No.
And you don't want anyone to feel like, oh, what a waste of time. That was so easy. I mean, you want to tailor it to everybody. And so, we had come up with two ways of doing this. And the first was simply in the design of puzzles, coming up with ways of teaching you how to solve the puzzle before you even got to the puzzle. So there would be random things to experiment with, to play around with, interactive things everywhere that you would just play with that didn't really have any stakes. Maybe it was just a lever that opened a door or something like that. But the mechanism of that lever would teach you a basic principle
that you use later.
That later on you would have already been exposed to, and whether you realized it or not, subconsciously, you would have just been taught how to solve this puzzle.
Right.
You would have been given the tools. So anyone could figure this out. And then the next layer of it was, the one thing that we found with storytelling games like this was that they were very lonely experiences. And what was missing was a character arc. And certainly you couldn't really be the character arc because it's just you. And relationships. So, all of these games you play and you go and you encounter a character and you click on the character and you have multiple responses to, a fixed branching set of questions and stuff like that. And that's cool and neat, especially when they're, nicely integrated into a 3D panning environment and all that stuff. Right. But it's not really building a character. And so what we decided is the one thing that you could possibly have was a character that you carried around with you. And since we were doing this thing where you're wearing this time suit and you're traveling around through time wearing this time suit, we came up with the idea of having a character who was an artificially intelligent character who was obsessed with human culture. And we would find this character. It wouldn't be something built into your suit. It would be a character that you found on one of your missions or one of the locations that you could go to in time. And you could download this character would offer to download himself because he was stuck in the space station and lonely. He offered to download himself into your suit. And because he had basically, absorbed all of the databases that he had access to, he would be your online historical knowledge as you travel through time trying to solve all of these mysteries. And not only that, but we actually developed a relationship that built through the course of the adventure between you and this character. And of course, he was very comedic because it was Matt, right? You carried Matt around with you.
Right.
So he was funny.
So he was super funny.
I used to be funny back then.
Oh, okay. he said super funny.
Yes. No, I mean, oh my God. Our recording sessions and our writing and brainstorming sessions are some of the
There's a lot of outtakes, I think, that
fun times. Oh, they're all in there. There wasn't a line we didn't like out of you. But no, I mean, it was, and to this day, I continue to get emails from people who were fans of this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And whose strongest memory of this game was, and spoiler alert, turn off the podcast if you plan to play this game, because it is in fact available on Steam.
That's right.
Some dedicated fans have actually translated this into modern day operating systems.
Wow.
I mean there really is a following for this stuff still, believe it or not.
But you're going to give a spoiler here. Is that what you're going to do?
But I am going to give a spoiler.
All right.
And the spoiler is that there's a moment in the story where Arthur, the AI character, in order to save you, downloads himself into your adversary's suit as a virus. To take over their suit. And it's the moment where you lose Arthur. And we got so much feedback that this was an incredible emotional moment for people, because this was a character, even if they didn't need help solving a particular puzzle, they would click Arthur anyway because they just wanted to hear what Arthur would say. And there were like 3 levels of help. One was like subtle, obscure hint, and then, a little bit more specific, and then, hammer you over the head and humiliate you with the answer kind of levels of help.
Just really quickly, Phil. So, Matt, what is the voice of Arthur? What can you do?
It's really just my voice.
Oh, yeah.
But do you talk like a little robot? Or
No,
like,
I don't. I don't have some weird fucking, I am Arthur. No.
This is set in the future when voice
just me.
synthesis was way better than Siri.
It's just my annoying voice.
So you don't do a high voice?
I only do the funny voices here.
Oh, do you? Okay. No, well, I haven't played this game. I'm sorry.
No.
I did not know.
No, it was really just me. But what was great is, we wrote a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Recording with Eric Dallaire, a lot of lines, a lot of things were improv, a lot of, but again, the basic.
San Leandro, Winnemucca. For all you Journeyman fans out there,
you know
remember that one.
you know what we're talking about. But but the fact that you've got this storyline and there's a character that helps you that is not flat. It's not a text that you read. It's an actual character that has an emotional resonance that you feel for when he's gone at the end. That was pretty special.
Yeah, we love that. And I to this day, I'm still proud of that whole concept. And it worked so well. So,
do you still work at all in the games industry now that you're in major theatrical films?
Fuck no, right?
I haven't. Obviously
you're busy. You're busy,
I'm
dude.
Busy,
yeah,
busy. But to be honest, part of the reason why I left games, or I left Presto about 6 months before the company closed shop, and it was primarily because I met my wife-to-be, and my wife lived in L.A. and worked in the TV industry, and so it was a perfect time to make that transition. We'd been doing Presto for 10 years. It was a good time to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, that was my original dream, was to, work in the movies and do concept design. Mm-hmm. So I made that move. And one of the things that I realized in the video game industry is that, we were making video games. And one of the things that's a little bit sad about the video game business is that it's so dependent on the state of the art of technology. It's fantastic that there's this diehard group of fans that are trying to keep Journeyman alive, but for the most part, any game you work on has got maybe a 9-month shelf life.
Really?
And then it's on to the next thing.
Time to move on.
It's not like movies where, you can go back and pick up a movie from the silent film era and watch it today, and it's just enjoyable
And be moved by it, yeah.
now as it was then.
Right.
But would you say, and you were talking about the idea of like, the choose your own adventure, those kind of things. I wonder if it is just the fact that with a video game, you are a participant who's manipulating this world, as opposed to a movie where you go in and you get swept away into somebody else's vision, that's what I really love about movies. And I mean, I like a video game every once in a while. I'm not necessarily a gamer, but if I wanted to write my own story, I would write my own story. The reason why I seek out entertainment is to have someone else entertain me.
Well, and there are, I mean, since we did the Journeyman games and Myst 3 and all of that stuff, games have really evolved. Even when we were still doing that stuff, there's a game called Half-Life that came out that did an incredible job of merging storytelling with interactivity. And it was just a first-person shooter. But because it was a real-time game, while a character was talking to you, you could still look around and you could still move around the room. And, the door wouldn't open until the monologue was done. But, it had a really good, strong story. And since then, games have evolved even further. I mean, there was a game recently called The Last of Us, which was very successful. And, unfortunately, I've got 2 kids, so chances of my spending 40 hours to finish it are about as, they're slightly less likely than my being able to have an uninterrupted shit.
Oh, those are the best. Yeah.
But they are extremely moving experiences. But it's a different kind of experience, and I think what we sort of, and by we I mean I think all of the people who were pioneering interactive storytelling back in the 90s, what we all sort of came to realize was that the multiple ending thing doesn't really work. It's a waste of resources. What you want to give people is the illusion of freedom, the illusion of self-control, while still giving them one really good, satisfying story, right? So it ends up being the branching with nodes kind of model where you start at point A and it starts with some linear storytelling, and then it branches out, and then you can explore the free world, and then there's X number of things that you have to solve, and you can solve them in any order.
And it finally funnels
you. And then
you.
It funnels you back to a point where, it's second act storytelling moment, whatever, and then branches out and funnels back and branches out and funnels back. And nowadays with, when you're not pre-rendering everything, you're not pre-creating all the images, and you can have very immersive worlds with render on the fly, rendering engines. You now have the ability to even more seamlessly blend in those storytelling moments where you still have a lot of freedom, and the character like follows you around and gives you your story beats or whatever, and you don't even realize that the world is locked off until that's done, because it isn't really. So they're much more immersive, and I think it is definitely a form of storytelling that's here to stay. The challenge with it from a longevity standpoint is that it's still dependent on what the technology is of the moment.
Right.
If it wasn't for Steam and these fans, I don't even think I'd have the equipment to play any of my old games.
Yeah, because there's so many different, it's changing so rapidly. Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, as far as, now with you being in the film industry, you had talked about other pioneering designers like SYD Mead and RALPH McQUARRIE, H.R. Giger. Today with technology in films, I mean, we can do anything. And where do you see trends going now? Who's the SYD Mead or the H.R. Giger of today, or is there one? What's going to be the next game changer? And what do you see as far as design? I mean, the way that, Blade Runner changed things and Tron had an influence. I mean, what is the next? Are there things now that's the current day that's going to have that same kind of influence?
Well, I think it's far more challenging to be that kind of game changer now, because, when SYD Mead and RALPH McQUARRIE and Joe Johnson, even Robert McCall, who was primarily a space artist working for NASA, he did some concept design on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, right.
And doing some of that early work that I think influenced, all of these other concept designers. But that was it. Those were the guys. There weren't that many people working. There wasn't that much out there.
Right.
And now, as we've talked about before, what used to be the B movie is now
it's the mainstream.
It's the
Now
mainstream, you know, and mainstream television and video games were also part of the popularization of science fiction and fantasy as the mainstream rather than the fringe.
Right.
And so, you know, nowadays there are any number of schools that teach this stuff and a vast pool of potential employers because, you know, there's maybe 200 and something illustrators in our guild working in the movie business, but then there's maybe a couple of thousand working in the video game business because, you know, they've got so much more material to generate. And then, of course, television, whereas, you know, you had Star Trek and you had Space 1999 and that was it.
Like,
you know, Blake 7.
Yeah.
You know, and that was all you had. Now, my God, there are 100 genre shows
content
running right now. So
it's
much.
Crazy.
You know, and so much of it is good too on television.
Agreed.
Like, oh my God,
it's almost too much.
I can't keep up.
It makes you, it freaks you out. Actually, yeah.
So I just don't think there's, in a world this saturated, for someone to come out as the next Sid Mead. I don't think there's the potential for that.
Right.
You know, it's like, who's going to be the next Henry Ford?
Yeah, or
like
the next Beatles.
No, I mean, the car's been invented now.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
You can refine it, and you can do a great job of it.
But
but you're not going to be the next Henry Ford. Not in this business.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. Well, give up your dreams, listeners at home.
Phil, I really appreciate you bringing a bunch of this up, and you mentioned some great guys. I just wanted to throw out a little shout out because he does have a special place in my heart, and that is Walter Jeffries from Star Trek, because the Enterprise that he created when he was asked to make the spaceship, I mean, basically was told what not to make. And so he had to come up with this on his own. But Roddenberry said, hey, no rockets. That's what we've known. You know, no smoke or fire coming out of it. And
no sparklers.
Yeah, exactly. So he came up with and no fins. He wanted no fins, no wings or anything like that. Right. And so Jeffries came up with this beautiful
it was very,
design.
very ahead of its time.
But and if you think about it, the thing I love about that and all the work that he did, whatever you want to say about some of the design, it would look kind of hokey. Look, this is for a TV show. But, I mean, there's an actual section of the ship that is named the Jeffries Tube. I mean, he designed it, and it's an homage to him for his design.
He did this incredible design with these two tubular nacelles and a saucer on the bottom.
Yeah.
On the bottom.
No, it's on the top.
Well, no, that's where
it is now, but that's not how he designed it.
They flipped it.
They flipped it.
Really?
Gene Roddenberry saw what he designed and said, I like it, but I like it better this way.
Really?
He
That's
flipped it upside down.
Yeah.
Huh. Great
That's
story.
Cool. That's cool.
But I wanted to bring up his name because I love all the stuff that he did with Star Trek.
All the designs in Star Trek. You know, it's funny.
Classic Star Trek from 1966.
And that retro science fiction thing where, you know, I always love when they go back, when they try to do a show like Enterprise, and Enterprise is supposed to be before the 60s
and it looks
show.
so much
and
more
like,
advanced.
wow. What happened?
Did they ever go downhill?
But I mean, there's so much great science fiction design that we could just go on and on.
But like you said, there is so much content now, but a lot of it is good, and that's the good thing. You know, there's so much to enjoy. You know?
Absolutely. And the just speaking of Star Trek and that period of time, I mean, at that time, I mean, there was Star Trek and there was Space 1999, and of course, I have to say I was on the Space 1999 camp. Not because the stories were better, because God knows they weren't.
No, but visually,
it looked really cool.
Man, that design
those
to
eagles
this day holds up.
I love
all of that.
All those ships.
All of that Jerry Anderson.
Yes. UFO. Yeah, I love all that stuff.
Really great stuff.
Even like the
God, I wanted those corgi toys.
which are so expensive.
Got them
now to
upstairs.
get. Yeah, I know.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
But before we launch you into the future of your life, is there anything you're working on right now that you can talk about that's coming up in any way?
That we can
plug,
look forward to.
And it could be anything. I mean, anything you want to plug or say to our listeners, look out for this because it's going to be
Big.
Wow. Next thing to come out that I worked on will probably be Kingsman 2.
Sweet.
Oh, okay.
Followed by, I would guess, Avengers 3 and 4, because I've been working on those for about 14 months.
Wow.
Awesome.
Looks good, yes?
There's going to be
God,
there's going to be superheroes in it, right? There's going to be superheroes in it. You can say that.
All of them.
Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait.
Howard the Duck? Yeah, no, don't say anything. Don't say anything.
Phil, thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
pleasure.
I'm
Yeah.
so happy to have you and talk to you. God, we haven't seen each other in a pretty long time.
Well, he's got kids, man.
Well, since the pizza place.
Well, we had the pizza place, yeah, but like a long hang.
yes,
A
indeed.
long, intimate, loving.
The sad thing about LA is you'll have so many friends here and you'll just never see them.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, maybe no. That's the sad thing about parenthood. Never mind.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Yes,
and
thanks so much, Phil.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. My favorite thing to do besides draw.
Sweet. We'll have you back. Please come back.
Will do.
Okay. And here's a perfect time for.
A listener shout out.
Shout out!
This goes out to Vic Avon from Brick, New Jersey.
Vic
All right.
Avon!
Great name.
Vic is a metalhead, a wrestling fan, musician, horror nerd, and an overall awesomely introverted person.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a
Vic tells us that
cauldron of contradictions.
Vic says he loves the show and listens every week. Horror sci-fi fans unite. So thank you, Vic.
Thank you,
for
Vic.
listening. We appreciate your support. Also want to mention Scott Weatherly, our fan from Oakthorpe, England,
Scott Weatherly!
who now has his own podcast, the 20th Century Geek, that's doing pretty well.
Oh.
Cool.
And he recently
Way to downplay it.
Scott recently tweeted he's got a new life goal. Get famous enough to get on Monster Party, annoy Larry,
What?
get called a clown.
All right. That
See?
should be everybody's goal, really.
Yeah.
Hashtag life goals, hashtag clown. Thank
right.
you, Scott.
Well, I can
Thanks.
help
Thanks,
you
Scott.
out, and
Yes, you.
you know,
Yes, you can, Larry.
Whenever you're on this side of the pond, let us know, and we might just do a crossover. And meanwhile, we invite our listeners to check out his podcast, 20th Century Geek.
Yes.
Let's
Cool.
also remind our listeners that you can find us on Facebook and see, you've got called a clown already, Scott.
What? No, that wasn't him.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then never mind. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Monster Party TV, on Twitter at Monster Party HQ, also Instagram, we are Monster Party HQ. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please take a moment and write a review. Reminder that you can also find us on Google Play Music for those of you with Androids. And we are now selling the Monster Party cap on our eBay store, which is Monster Party Store, easy to remember.
It's a really good design.
Yes.
It's immaculate. Yes.
Get it now. Right now.
Yes, before it's too late.
Oh, yeah.
Inside joke. On that note, I am Matt Weinhold.
I am Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Stroth.
And I'm James Gonis.
Keep America strong.
Watch sci-fi films with really cool designs. Like a unicorn. Are you done tapping?
I'm not tapping. He's tapping.
No, I just don't. Clean. Need clean sound. Here we go. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the shared universe of four sad drunk nerds.
Sad.
All right, happy.
I'm very happy.
Happy now.
All right, let's do that again.
It's great for me to bring up something that we don't know what it's called, but you see, that's what I do, Phil. That's what I do.
And it's just because I've had a little bit of alcohol. I've had like three
demon
sips,
booze.
three
Good,
sips,
yeah,
and as
yeah.
a father of two, 3 sips means it's all the way up to my knees, maybe mid-thigh by now.